Welcome to Goofy Harry. Today's adventure: what if Harry Potter and Daphne Greengrass were reborn as Zeus and Hera? If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The train remembers the trolley which had long passed. Harry sat in the compartment with his knees against the seat across from him, watching the green flicker of countryside through glass that smelled faintly of sulfur. He had bought too much candy. Some of it was moving. He had stuffed the chocolate frog cards into the pocket of his oversized jeans and resolved not to think about Hagrid for at least a quarter of an hour, because thinking about Hagrid made him feel like a small dog being carried across a field, and he had only just gotten used to walking again. The Weasley boy with the smudge on his nose had wandered off to find his brothers. Harry was glad. He liked Ron in the way you like a stranger on a long bus ride, when you both decide not to be strangers because the alternative is silence. But silence was, at the moment, the thing he wanted most, and the train was surprisingly stingy with it. The compartment door slid open. The girl in the doorway took stock of him with the brief, methodical attention people pay to a piece of furniture they are considering moving. Blonde, pale, posture out of a black and white film, robes too clean. She looked 11 and also did not. He wondered if his own face did the same trick to people who hadn't seen him eat candy off the floor. "Most of the train is full," she said, voice even, not unkind, not warm. "May I sit?" It wasn't quite a question. He shrugged, which was an answer he had developed for the Dursleys and had not yet retired. She sat opposite him, smoothed her skirt, and did not speak. The train kept going. He liked that about her. After a while she opened a book, which appeared to be in Latin. After another while he gave up not looking at her and offered her one of the chocolate frogs because he had been raised by people who did not share food and he was experimenting with not being them. She studied the frog. "Thank you," she said. "I dislike chocolate. Bad luck for you." A faint twitch at the corner of her mouth that wasn't a smile, just the place where one might begin. She returned to her Latin. He looked out at the countryside. There was a moor going by, brown in the early dusk, and a lone heron standing in shallow water like a man waiting for someone who wasn't coming. He said without intending to, "Have we met?" She did not look up. "I have not had the pleasure." "I just, quite likely." Now she did look up, pale blue eyes, the kind of eyes that catalog. "We are 11. I expect the world to be full of people we have not met. It is a feature of the age." "Right, sorry, Daphne Greengrass, Harry Potter." The book closed by itself on her thumb. She had looked at him with the same attention as before, but her chin had risen by a single measured degree. "Of course you are." "It usually is," he said, and the joke felt borrowed from someone else and he had no idea who, except that he had said it before in another room under another light, with the light being lit by a different, the world tilted. Not the train. The train kept doing its honest job, but behind his eyes the room peeled away. He was on a hillside above a sea the wrong shade of blue. He was on a throne. He was not sitting on the throne. He was standing in front of the throne with his arms full of a smaller body, and the smaller body was not breathing, and he was about to break a sky into pieces because he had been promised that it would not happen, that not even kings were allowed to lose their children unless they made the rule themselves, and he had not made the rule, and so the rule should not exist. He was making love. He was ashamed of it. He was in a council, and a woman with a face he knew the way you know a wound was telling him, very calmly, that she was going to leave him, that she was going to stay, that she had bargained with the river and the river had laughed, and that she would not forgive him this time unless he put down the staff with the lightning in it and apologized like a man and not like a god. He had not put it down. He had put it down later, but not when it would have mattered. He was wet. He was hungry. He was holding a knife. He was 9. He was 60,000. He was a baby being passed from hand to nervous hand. Harry came up out of the memory like a swimmer coming up out of dark water and found himself still in the train compartment. The air in the compartment was hot. The window had fogged on the inside in the shape of his out-breath. The chocolate frog was inert on the seat between them. The girl was looking at him. She was holding the edge of the seat with one hand. The wood under her fingers had darkened by half a shade. "Hera," he said. The word came out without permission. It was a word he had not learned in this life. It belonged to a mouth he had not had for 2,000 years. He was 11. He was 60,000. He sat very still because moving felt like it might break something he had not yet had time to itemize. Daphne Greengrass said, in a voice with no 11 in it at all, "Husband." They watched each other. The train kept doing its honest job. Outside, the moor rolled by. The heron was gone. There would be other herons. The world was full of them and always had been. "All right," Harry said finally. He scratched the back of his neck. He did not know what to do with his hands. He had never known what to do with his hands. He had carried lightning in them for so long he had forgotten how a hand was supposed to look at rest. All right, Daphne said. "This is a lot." This is a lot. The compartment did its slow, mortal rocking. Somewhere down the corridor, a child laughed. Somewhere closer, a trolley wheel squeaked. 2,000 years, Harry said. At least, you remember, yes, all of it, yes. He let out a long breath through his nose. He was going to find this funny in about a year. He could already feel that. At the moment, he was a small, thin boy with too many memories in him, and a piece of chocolate going soft in a wrapper, and he found that the only thing he could think to say was the most useless thing in any language. He said it anyway. Hi. She closed her eyes. He watched her recover. It was a thing he had watched her do across 100 breakfasts in another life, and the muscles of her face were not the same muscles, but the recovery was. She breathed. She lifted her chin. She opened her eyes. She was, again, a Slytherin first year of unimpeachable composure. Hello, she said. This is the bit where we have a long talk. Yes, you first. That is unchivalrous. I'm out of practice with the chivalry. You were never in practice with the chivalry. Fair. She drew breath. It came in deeper than she meant it to, and she let it out slowly. I am 11 years old, Harry Potter. I am a daughter of a minor pureblood family in Wiltshire. My sister is 7. I have a tutor named Madame Cowlier who teaches me French. 2 minutes ago I was reading Ovid. Yes, and a great deal more besides. Yes, do not, she said, make me say it. He didn't. They sat with it. Outside the light kept turning, and a lake came by and went, and a stand of beech trees came by and went. And he thought of all the lakes and all the trees and all the times he had been a man and a god and a falling star, and he had never, none of those times, sat in a moving box on a child's errand opposite his ex-wife. And he thought, well, that is the thing about long lives, you keep finding new shapes for them. What do we do, she said, with this? He thought. The thinking took a while, he let it. There were 60 centuries to consult. He went to the part of his mind that had once decided whether to drown the world and noted, with mild interest, that the part was still there and still functioned. We are going, he said, to a school for children. I think we should be children for a year. We should hide. We should look around. We should find out who else has woken up. Some of us will have. Some of us will be in this school. Some of us will be in worse places. Yes, and after the year we will have a better view. Pragmatic. I can do pragmatic. I have been a king. You have been a poor king. I have been a king of varying quality. She looked at him for a moment, and he saw, 2 millennia after the last time he had seen it, something like rueful amusement come into the face of the woman he had been married to for an epoch, not warmth. He had no claim on her warmth, and they both knew it, and it was a relief to know it. Just amusement, recognition, the thing that survives in the people who have known you longest, which is the knowledge of which jokes you can no longer make about yourself. Listen, he said, yes, I do not want to do it again. Do what? Be married. She blinked once, considered. No, she said, nor I, right. Friends, she said, testing the word with the care a chemist gives a new compound. If we can manage it, we are not celebrated for managing it. We have 2,000 years more practice at being people. That is true, and we are 11, which historically has done wonders for our humility. A real laugh this time, soft, 3 breaths long and gone. He marked it and put it away. He could be careful with that. He could be careful with a lot of things. He had not always been, and the people who had paid for his lapses were not going to pay again on his account. Friends then, she said, friends with history, they shook on it. Her hand was small, so was his. Through the small hands ran a current that was not small at all, and on the windowsill a frost flower bloomed for half a second and was gone. Daphne folded her hands in her lap. We will need names for this. Daphne, presumably, and Harry. In public, and in private, he thought about it. The names had been worn smooth by use. He didn't want them worn anymore. In private, he said, we'll use what comes up. Acceptable. Slytherin, he said. He was making a list now. The list-making was steadying him. The list-making had always steadied him. You'll go to Slytherin. I will. And I will not. Number pity. I'm too obvious for it. They'd see me coming. Where then? Gryffindor, probably. Tedious. Useful. The hat will sort me where the war wants me. The war. There is going to be a war. There is always going to be a war. He nodded. He had said it. It had been a long time since he had said it without flinching, and he found with a small, clean satisfaction that he had said it without flinching. Some things you stopped flinching at after the 3rd or 4th time. He was on his 32nd. Voldemort, she said. Voldemort. You know the name, Hagrid told me. It is an upstart's name. Yes. He took a body and broke it into 7 pieces and called himself a king. Yes, a neat trick, borrowed. He is going to be sorry. Almost certainly, let us not warn him. Number, she considered the chocolate frog. She considered the window. She considered him. Tell me about your life, she said. This life, the 11 years. He told her briefly. Cupboard, aunt and uncle and a cousin who had been taught to think with his fists. The letter, Hagrid. the day he had learned what he was, where he had learned that he was famous for surviving the night his parents had not. He kept the recital flat. He had told the story to no one, and no one had asked. She listened with a face he remembered, the face she had used in court with petitioners, the face that gave the speaker the dignity of being heard without giving them the comfort of being agreed with. When he was done, she looked at him for a long moment. "They will have a great deal to answer for," she said. "Your relations, they are not my problem. They are now mine. Daphne, Hera," she said mildly, and then when he flinched, "I will not pursue them. I will simply note them. I have spent 2,000 years not pursuing people on your behalf, husband now friend. I find I am still good at it. Thank you. Tell me yours," he said. 11 years, less interesting. House in Wiltshire, a garden, a tutor, a sister I love, parents I tolerate. She paused. "I expect," she said, "I shall like the sister better when I have seen her with new eyes. The parents I shall not see at all if I can help it." "Sensible. You'll need allies," she said. "Beyond me. I'll need to find them. Some are already here. You can feel that." "Yes, I can feel one of them," he said. "On this train, 2 carriages back, argumentative, female. Athena, maybe, nascent. I will sit with her at some point. Be gentle, she doesn't know yet. I am always gentle." He laughed then, 3 breaths like hers. He marked it and put it away. The compartment door slid open. A red-headed boy stood in the doorway with a sandwich in his hand and a question on his face that died as soon as it met the air in the room. Harry had time, in the half-second before Ron spoke, to be impressed at how entirely the air in the room had changed. Daphne had already smoothed her face into a portrait of mild boredom. Harry's own face he could not see, but he hoped it was doing the right things. "Oh," said Ron Weasley. "Sorry, wrong, you're fine," Harry said. "Come in if you want." Actually I was looking for the loo. Down the corridor, past the trolley. Right, cheers." Ron looked at Daphne. Daphne looked back at Ron with the precise, polite, excavating courtesy of a woman doing arithmetic. Ron flinched without knowing he had flinched, nodded twice and retreated. When the door slid shut, Daphne said, without lifting her eyes from her book, which had reopened itself in her lap, "Your friend. Apparently. Be kind to him. Yes, he will be important to you. They were always important, the mortals who travel with us. Yes, do not lose him." Number, she turned a page. "I should go back to my carriage. There will be people looking for me. I am known to a small number of them. We should not announce ourselves." "Yes," she rose. She paused with her hand on the door. He watched the back of her, the absolute blade-straight line of her, and then she turned and looked at him over her shoulder. "Husband, wife, friends," she said very softly like a vow. "Friends," he said. She left. The door slid shut. He sat for some minutes staring at the seat where she had been, and then he picked up the inert chocolate frog and ate it. It tasted faintly of ash. He stood, stretched. The body was a child's, it stretched obligingly. He pressed his palms flat against the compartment window and watched the green and gray roll past and let the small tremor in his hands work itself out against the glass. A man on a hilltop in the middle distance was walking 3 sheepdogs. The dogs were not yet trained. They were knocking each other over in the heather, and the man was laughing without making any sound that could carry, and Harry watched him the way a tired traveler watches a window in a hospital corridor that opens onto a courtyard. The world had gone on. The world always did. It had been doing it without him for 2,000 years and had lost no rhythm. He had imagined in his idler centuries that the world would notice his absence. It had not. He counted this on balance as a kindness. He sat down again. He reminded himself, 11. He reminded himself also Zeus. He had never had to make these 2 facts agree before. He suspected he would not have to make them agree today. He would only have to make them not openly contradict each other, and that, in the long run, was what kingship had taught him. The compartment without her was less interesting. He had never, in any life, found this particular thing to be untrue. He sat for a while and ate 2 more chocolate frogs and read 3 of the cards, and learned that he was a famous infant, and that Albus Dumbledore liked 10-pin bowling. Ron came back. Ron had not, in fact, gone to the loo, because Ron had been afraid of Daphne, and Ron was the kind of person who admitted such things eventually. And within 10 minutes, Harry had been told the names of all of Ron's brothers, the entirety of his sister's secret love of Quidditch, and the precise hexes one of his older brothers had perfected for nose-breaking. Harry listened. Listening was, after a long enough life, the easiest way to be useful to people. He laughed when laughter was clearly the right answer. He asked when asking was. He did not have to perform very hard. He liked the boy, this Ron, who had freckles and long hands and wanting eyes that he tried to hide under a scowl. The compartment door slid open again. A bushy-haired girl with the kind of front teeth a child does not yet have control of stood in the doorway and said, with neither preamble nor breath, "Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one." Harry took her in. Brown hair cluttered, robes she had not finished growing into, eyes that had already finished growing. He did the small private check he had not yet learned not to do. He did not feel a goddess in her, not yet. But he felt the shape of where one would fit, the room she was making for it without knowing she was making it. "No toad," he said. "Sorry." "You're doing your spell wrong," she said to Ron, who had been holding his wand mid-recitation of a comic levitation. "Are you Harry Potter?" "I am. I'm Hermione Granger. I've read about you. There's been a great deal in the books." She paused, took stock of his unbrushed hair and the chocolate frog wrappers and the not very glamorous reality of him, and proceeded with admirable adjustment. "Right, toad, if you see one. We will pass on word." She left. Ron made a face at the door. Harry filed the moment with care, the absence in the room making, possibly worth watching, possibly Athena, possibly another, possibly nothing. The countryside grew dark. They changed into robes. Ron's robes were a hand-down. Harry's robes were stiff with newness. Ron made a joke about it, and they both laughed, and the laughing was nearly real. The train slowed. The world outside the windows became a station, and a great noise and Hagrid's voice booming over everything calling for first years. 2 carriages back, Daphne Greengrass sat beside Pansy Parkinson and across from Tracy Davis, and did the small social work of being 11. She nodded when nodding was due and corrected Pansy's pronunciation of a French word with the half-rolled patience of someone who had heard worse and would hear it again, and inwardly she watched the rim of her own hands and waited for them to stop trembling. They did not stop. They had not stopped since the train compartment. They would, she thought, stop when she had work for them. They had never trembled when there was work. "Greengrass," said Pansy. "What's wrong with you? You've gone quiet." "Have I?" "Yes." "Like a portrait. How dreadful for the portrait. You're funny tonight. It is the train air." Pansy lost interest in her, as Pansy was prone to do with anyone who did not need attention, and turned to the more interesting work of talking about herself. Daphne let her. She watched the lights of the station coming up over the hill and thought about a boy with a chocolate frog in his hand and a sky in his eyes, and she considered, with the part of her that had once been a queen and would, against her wishes, be one again if the world insisted, the long career of arranging her hair around the shape of his absences. She was not going to do that this time. She had decided this on the train. She would put it down in stone if she had to. She was going to be his friend and he was going to be hers, and it was going to be a different kind of work. The work, she thought, of holding him to a higher standard, without owing him a wedding for it. "Greengrass," said Pansy. "We're here." "Yes," said Daphne. "We're here." The first years gathered on the platform under Hagrid's enormous lantern. Harry, in the middle of the crowd, raised his hand to Hagrid's wave and let himself be herded toward the boats. Daphne, somewhere behind him, did not look at him. The not looking was a kind of looking. He knew the shape of it. Old practice. The boats glided over a black lake under a black sky, and the castle came up out of the dark on a cliff. He had seen a great many castles. He had pulled at least 3 of them down and built one. This one he found he liked. It had the comfortable look of a place that knew it was old and was no longer trying to impress anyone. Above it, in the high air over a tower, the wind moved in patterns he recognized. He kept his face still. He noted the patterns. He thought in the back of his mind that the sky was saying hello, and he allowed himself to say hello back, very privately, the way you would nod at an old colleague across a room without breaking the conversation you were in. A small dragon-shaped object on the prow of the boat sneezed. Ron, beside him, jumped. Hagrid, 2 boats over, laughed. The lake water lapped. The air smelled of weed and lichen. Harry, 11, 60,000, no longer sure which arithmetic to use, kept his hands folded carefully in his lap. McGonagall met them in the entrance hall with a face that had been honed on a great many first-year faces and was not impressed by his. Good for her. He liked her at once. "You will wait here," she said. "When I return, you will follow me to the great hall, where you will be sorted into your houses. Your house is your family while you are at Hogwarts. Triumph will earn it points. Rule-breaking will lose it points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points wins the house cup. A great honor." She let the word honor sit, uninfluenced by sarcasm, because it had not occurred to her to be sarcastic about honor in 20 years. She left. Several of the children began to talk too loudly. A few cried. Neville Longbottom of the Lost Toad performed a small miracle of self-mastery and did not cry. Harry watched him and revised, faintly upward, his estimate of Longbottom. A blonde child with an ironed face approached him, said his name. Said the word Malfoy, in the manner of a child who had been told by adults that his name was a good word. Offered him a hand. Harry had been in a great many such rooms. He had been offered a great many such hands. He had even on occasion been the child offering his. "Thank you," he said mildly. "I'll find my own way." He did not take the hand. He was kind about it. Malfoy's face did the small ugly thing that faces do when politeness has been used as a weapon by someone who has, alarmingly, more practice with politeness than the user. Malfoy stepped back. Crabbe and Goyle behind him did nothing, because nothing was generally what they did. McGonagall returned. They followed her in. The ceiling of the great hall was the color the night had been outside, more or less, which was a nice touch. 4 long tables, the staff at the high table. Dumbledore at the center, in robes he could probably set fire to without removing, the sorting hat on a stool. Harry made his catalogue briefly, the way a man might check the exits of a new room out of habit. Old habit. He found with the small wry amusement that had become his most useful expression in this life that the exits were where he expected. The hat sang. Names were called. Children went up. Children went under the hat. Children were sorted. Daphne Greengrass was called. She walked up with the carriage of a much older woman, which would, he thought, be remarked on, but no one had the language for it. She sat on the stool. The hat went on. The hat froze. The hat stayed frozen for 2 seconds longer than it had any business doing. The hall, which had begun to shuffle out of the brief silence of attention, began to attend again. The hat said audibly what could only have been a small sigh. Then it said, Slytherin, with the particular care of a creature that had decided not to ask any of the questions it suddenly had. Daphne walked to the Slytherin table. She did not look at Harry. The not looking was a fine thread between them taut. He, when his name was called, walked up calmly and sat down on the stool and let the hat fall over his eyes. "Well," said the hat in his ear. "Well, well, well. Hat," he said very quietly in the polite voice he had used for diplomats, "you are not what I prepared for. I expect not. There is a great deal of you. I am uncertain my mouth will be large enough to fit the syllables. I will not be offended by a small mouth. You belong nowhere I have been built to put you. Then put me where the work is." A long pause. He felt the hat consider him and consider him and consider him, picking at his 11-year-old life like a man going through a coat for keys. Slytherin would be tidy. It would be obvious. Yes, send me where I can do the work without being watched. That is many places. Send me where the boy in me has friends. A longer pause, then in his ear, very softly. "I have done my job for 1,000 years, and I do not flatter myself I do it well. But for whatever it is worth from my brim to your ear, be careful, Lord. Be careful what you build. Be careful who you tell. The school is full of children, and children remember." "I know. Gryffindor," said the hat. He took it off. He set it on the stool. He walked to the Gryffindor table, where the red-headed twins he had not yet met were drumming on the table and chanting his name, and sat down between them. They were identical down to the freckles and dressed almost identical, and they reached out at the same instant to clap him on the same shoulder, and the air around the two of them did the small ripple of a thing that was paying attention to itself. He filed it. He had felt that ripple before. He did not name it yet, not in a hall where anyone could be listening. "Welcome to Gryffindor, Harry Potter," said the one on his left. "We've been hoping for you," said the one on his right. "In the long-suffering way of men who have heard your name a great deal. Without," said the one on his left, "ever quite expecting to like you. I'll try not to disappoint." "Oh, we have low expectations," said the one on his right. "It's the secret of our happiness." He laughed, 3 breaths. He marked it and put it away. He clapped Ron on the back of the hand when Ron arrived a little later, sweating from his own stool, and the two of them sat side by side and ate. The food was good, in the deliberate way that food in old buildings is good, having been cooked by people whose grandmothers cooked it for the same length of time and adjusted the salt accordingly. Harry watched Ron eat the way a man watches a flood. He watched himself eat with more care than he intended. The body had not had a feast in 11 years and was not minded to be polite about it. He kept half a loaf back, and he kept a smaller plate at the periphery of his place setting, and he did not lecture himself about either. The Dursleys had taught him many things. The most useful of them was the habit of pocketing bread. "That's Snape," said one of the twins, jerking his chin at the high table. Harry looked. He did not look long. He did not need to look long. The man at the second seat from the left wore black like it had been welded onto him, and his attention was an ungenerous thing already. And it was, just then, on Harry, the way a hawk's attention is on a field mouse from above. Harry let his own attention drift past him, because the lesson of Mouse and Hawk is not what the hawk thinks of the mouse, but how the mouse spends its afternoon. The man at the second seat narrowed 1/4 of a degree. Harry, half aware that he was being read, gave him very politely nothing to read. "Snape doesn't like Gryffindors," said the other twin. "He'll love you." Comforting. "That's Quirrell," said the first twin. The turban. Harry looked at the turban. He kept his face flat. He kept his breath even. There was a thread of cold air running along the man's collar, pulled there from very far away, and the thread had a voice in it, and the voice was thin and old and ambitious and not, by any honest measure, alive. He had felt that flavor before. He had walked among shades a great deal. He had hosted them sometimes at his own table in an older life. The shade in Quirrell's turban was a very small and angry one. It noticed him noticing. It cringed. He looked away. "And the headmaster you'll meet," said the second twin, "in due course." "He's all right," said the first. "Keeps his eccentricity in check, mostly. Dumbledore, at the center of the high table, stood up to give the start-of-term address, and Harry listened with the small portion of his attention that listening required, and used the rest to find Daphne Greengrass at the Slytherin table. She was already looking at him. She did not break the look. He did not break the look. It was not warmth, and it was not yearning. It was the small, quiet acknowledgement of two old soldiers spotting each other across a parade ground and confirming that, yes, the regiment had assembled, yes, the formation was ragged, yes, the work was about to begin. She gave him a quarter-degree nod. He gave her one back. Then simultaneously, by what appeared to be coincidence, they both looked at Quirrell. She had felt it too. She returned to her chicken. He returned to his potatoes. Across the hall at the Slytherin table, Daphne Greengrass cut a piece of chicken into small, precise squares and did not look up. Old practice. The feast ended. The first years were marshaled into their houses. The Gryffindors were led up the stairs by a tall, bossy, well-meaning boy whose hair was the same shade of red as the twins, and who turned out to be their elder brother Percy. Percy delivered his speech about the staircases with such dutiful solemnity that Harry made a private resolve not to embarrass him. The staircases moved. The portraits on the walls had opinions. The fat lady wanted a password, got one, and let them in. The dorm was high and round and smelled of wood smoke and old wool, and there were 5 beds with 5 trunks, and somewhere in the rafters a small bird was committed to an aria of about 3 notes. Ron flopped onto the nearest bed. Neville sat on his and looked at his hands for a long time. Seamus and Dean introduced themselves to each other, and then to Harry, all at once, in a happy avalanche that he weathered with the patience of a man at a wedding he was not the bridegroom of. He nodded. He shook hands. He chose the bed by the window because the bed by the window had the best line of sight on the door. Old habit. Old habit was already useful here. He brushed his teeth in the bathroom sink. The mirror, which he had been warned about, said his hair needed work, and he agreed with the mirror. He returned to the dorm. He climbed into his bed. He drew the curtains. He did not, that first night, expect to sleep. He had a great many things to think about, and the bed, while soft, was unfamiliar, and the curtain rings had unfamiliar weights, and somewhere above his head, an owl was deciding whether it preferred the gable or the window. He lay flat on his back and listened to Ron's snoring across the dorm, and to Seamus's mumbled Irish prayers, and to Dean's careful breathing, and to Neville's half-stifled, near-soundless homesickness. And he thought about Athena in a girl with bushy hair who corrected wand pronunciation, and he thought about Hera at a Slytherin table cutting chicken into squares. And he thought about the small private ribbon of cold air that he had felt running along the edge of the high table and around Quirrell's collar and could not yet name. A small movement in the curtain. He turned his head. A doxy had crawled under the gap. Tiny, nail-faced, all teeth and elbows. The dormelf cleaning had missed it. The sheets must have come down with 1 or 2 from storage. It was inching toward Neville's bed. Doxy's bit. Doxies on first-year fingers were unpleasant. He thought briefly about reaching for his wand. His wand was on the bedside table. The wand was, in this life, real and useful and for certain kinds of work appropriate. This work was small. He looked at the doxy. He thought, very specifically, the shape of the small thought. He had once held lightning in his palm and considered the entire Aegean and decided what it was for. He had once, with the same hand, put out a candle from across a room because he had been bored. The candle had not been overly disappointed. The doxy, he thought, would not overly mind. The doxy stopped, stood up on its hind legs, looked at the canopy, looked very briefly and with some consternation at Harry, who watched it with the pleasant unfocus of a man looking at a clock. The thought moved between them. The doxy folded down into a small, neat, ash-colored shape on the floorboard. It did not smoke. It did not smell. It was just quietly no longer a doxy. Harry waited a moment. He listened for the flue or the painting in the corner. Nothing stirred. Hogwarts had not noticed. Hogwarts noticed many things, but it was a building tuned to children, and the ash on the floorboard had been placed by no child. He turned back to the canopy, closed his eyes, opened them, closed them again. The thing about being a child was that he had to do all the small things in order. He could not skip the small things. He had to lie still and pretend his body was tired in the way an 11-year-old body got tired, and he had to do this even though his body had 11 years fatigue in it. And Chapter 2. The politics of dinner. He woke at the hour he had woken at for 6,000 years, which was the hour the light first considered the kingdom, and decided it was permitted to begin. The dorm was dark. Ron was face down with one arm flung over the edge of the mattress and a thin line of drool. Neville was on his side with his fist closed around the bedsheet. Seamus had piled 3 pillows around his head as a protest against the existence of mornings. Dean was the only other one awake, and he was awake because he had heard Harry move, and the two of them traded a small nod across the dorm, and then Dean closed his eyes again and pretended he had not heard. Harry sat up. The ash where the doxy had been was gone. Hogwarts had collected it during the night without comment. He approved. He dressed. He had been dressing himself for 10 years and dressing other people for 2,000 more, and the task did not detain him. Tie went on by feel. Robe went on over the tie. He picked up the wand from the bedside table and held it for a moment, the way a man holds a hammer he has not used for a long time, considering the heft. Holly, Phoenix, 11 inches. He had walked at one time with a longer instrument, and the instrument had answered to him, and he had eventually retired the instrument because instruments tend to make their owners small. The wand was a good thing. The wand was a focus. He intended to use it the way a competent musician uses a second instrument, well, but without ostentation. He went down to breakfast. The Great Hall in morning light was a different country from the Great Hall the night before. The ceiling was the color of weak tea. The candles had been put out. The long tables were bare wood, and the food had been laid in a sensible English plenty. Porridge, toast, bacon, kippers, kettles of strong tea. He took porridge. He had been a great king, and he had been a poor babysitter, and he knew the value of porridge in October. Ron arrived 20 minutes later, with hair like a cat had slept in it, and ate 4 sausages without seeming to notice that he had. Harry let his attention drift across the hall. Daphne was at the Slytherin end, neat as a folded letter. She did not look at him. He did not look at her. Their not looking had already established its protocol overnight, the way long marriages establish protocols whether or not they are still marriages. He was glad of the protocol. He had not had to negotiate it. The body did the work. The mind kept its counsel. Hermione Granger was at the Gryffindor end, 3 seats down on the other side of the table, eating toast with both elbows tucked in and reading a book propped on a salt cellar. The book, from this angle, was not a school book. It was, at a guess, on theory of charms. She did not look up to see if he was looking. He was not looking in any way she could have seen. He was aware of her in the way a chessmaster is aware of a piece on the board, and he was filing the way the air sat around her, which was the way air sits around someone who has not yet had to cope with the size of themselves. Possibly Athena. Probably. He would know in a month. The schedules came around. McGonagall handed his over with no ceremony. Snape passed by the Slytherin table and laid Daphne's down beside her plate. Her small, precise nod of thanks was the kind of nod one civil servant gives another. Across the hall, Snape's eyes flicked briefly to the Gryffindor end where Harry was sitting. The eyes did not stop on him for longer than a finger of time. They did stop. They were going to Transfiguration, charms, defense, potions, history, herbology, astronomy on Wednesday nights, flying lessons next Thursday. He read the schedule with the concentration of a man reviewing a campaign timetable, allotted himself a tutor in each subject in case a teacher's competence proved unequal to the task, and folded the parchment into his pocket. "What have we got first?" said Ron, who had been writing his name on the back of his timetable with a butter knife. Transfiguration. With McGonagall, Ron made a face. "Fred says she turns you into a watch if you mess up. She doesn't, but I imagine that's the point of the rumor." Fred says, "I am sure Fred says many things." Ron grinned. The grin was easy. The grin was against the body of a 30-second life, one of the small, precise medicines Harry had not known he needed. He let the grin land. He did not look across at the Slytherin table to check whether Daphne had clocked the grin landing. He knew she had. McGonagall's classroom was a room of long tables and a tabby cat sitting unblinking on the desk. The cat was McGonagall. He was meant to be impressed when she became a woman. He arranged his face into the appropriate degree of impressed and kept it there. "Today," said McGonagall, "we will be turning a match into a needle." She held up a match and did the thing briefly and without flourish, and the match was a needle, and she made it a match again. "You will not succeed today. You will not succeed for some time. You will, all of you, eventually. But transfiguration is precise work, and precision rewards patience." She passed out matches the class set to. The class produced mostly slightly damp matches. One of Lavender's matches caught fire. Hermione's match, by the end of the hour, was unmistakably pointed and had a small thread-like indentation that Hermione was looking at with the satisfaction of a person who has just verified something she did not entirely believe she could do. Harry let his match go silver halfway. It became something between a match and a needle, the head still wood, the body now metal. He held it up to the light, looked at it as though it had surprised him, looked at McGonagall. "Mr. Potter," said McGonagall, "that is a respectable beginning. Continue." He continued. He let the silver creep a quarter of an inch further along the wood by the end of class. McGonagall awarded Gryffindor 2 points. Harry received the points with the polite attention of a man hearing the wrong train announced and getting on it anyway. Charms with Flitwick was easier. Flitwick was a man who had been short for so long he had made an industry out of it, and his lectures climbed through his subject the way a small efficient mountaineer climbs a great mountain, with humor and pitons and a flask. He liked Harry on sight, which Harry attributed to the fact that he had laughed at one of Flitwick's jokes about a Bulgarian cricket. Flitwick noticed by the end of the second class that Harry was already producing a respectable Lumos. Flitwick did not say anything to him about this. Flitwick was a sharper man than the rumor about him allowed. Harry made a small private resolve to tell Flitwick the truth. Eventually, when the truth was something Flitwick could be useful with, defense with Quirrell was a study in performance. The man stuttered. The man's robe smelled faintly of garlic. The man flinched at the chalk that had been left on his desk, and at the door when it closed, and at his own voice when it came out a syllable louder than he had braced himself for. Harry sat in the back of the class and watched the stuttering with the close attention a doctor pays to a wound. The stuttering was real. The stuttering was also choreographed. Underneath the stutter in the rhythm of the breath was a thing that did not stutter and had not stuttered and would not stutter again until the parasite riding in the turban thought it useful for the host to be heard stuttering. The parasite was patient. The parasite was small. The parasite was sustaining itself on something outside the room, somewhere in the forbidden part of the third floor, he guessed, but he had not yet reconnoitered, and the parasite was, in its limited way, listening to him as a piece of meat listens to footsteps. Harry let his attention be a tedious 11-year-old's attention. He looked at the back of Ron's head. He twirled his quill. He answered no questions. The parasite lined very slightly in the turban, like a man straining to overhear a whisper, found nothing to hear, went back to whatever the parasite did when the parasite was not pretending to be a stutter. Harry made a mental note. He had felt the lean. The lean meant the parasite was, despite its small ambition, not stupid. It had picked his name out of all the names in the room and tested for resonance. There had been no resonance. He had given it none. After class, he took a small detour past the front of the classroom to retrieve a quill he had not lost. He came within arm's reach of Quirrell, who flinched. Cold thread along the man's collar lifted faintly toward Harry, the way a viper's tongue lifts toward a warm hand. Harry did not give it the warm hand. He retrieved his quill. He apologized for the stumble. He left. In the corridor outside, Daphne happened by no coincidence whatsoever to be passing. "Greengrass," he said. "Potter, tomorrow afternoon, library, 4th alcove, 2 o'clock. I have a Slytherin meeting at 2, 3. Acceptable." She did not pause. She did not look at him. They walked past each other in the corridor like two people who had remembered in the same moment that they had something to do at opposite ends of the building. He went on. Snape's classroom was in the dungeons. The corridor down was cold the way only old cold can be, the cold that has been lying in stone for 900 years and has settled into the molecules. The Slytherin first years were lined along one wall, the Gryffindor first years along the other. The two lines did not look at each other. He approved of this. Snape entered. The door slammed. The candles in their brackets jumped. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," Snape said, in a voice that did not invite reply, "as I doubt you will appreciate the beauty of a softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind and snaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you are not as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." Pause. The man had a great instinct for pause. Harry admired it. He had used it himself in older lives addressing armies. "Potter," Snape said, "our new celebrity." The class turned. Harry had been writing in his notebook, writing the date and the heading, Potions, Snape, Day 1, Dungeon, because writing things down was a habit older than this body and one he was committed to keeping. He looked up with the small, polite attention of a child who had expected to be addressed and had, accordingly, prepared no face. "Sir, Tell me, Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The book in his trunk had answered this question on page 11. He had read the book on the train. He had read the book again last night with a candle. He knew the answer. A sleeping draught, sir, he said. The draught of living death, I believe. Snape's face did the small, ugly readjustment that faces do when they have taken a punch they had not braced for. The man recovered immediately. The man was, in his way, formidable. Where, Potter, would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? The stomach of a goat, sir. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? There is none, sir. They are the same plant. It also goes by the name of aconite. The class was silent. The class had stopped breathing in the small, reflexive way classes stop breathing when one of their number is being torn open. Harry sat very still. He kept his face as flat as he could. He had not, he hoped, sounded smug. He had answered 3 questions in a row in the voice of a child who was anxious to do well, and that was, after all, what he was meant to be. He gave Snape an apologetic half-smile. The half-smile said, "I have been reading ahead, sir. Please do not punish me for it." Snape's mouth did a small ironic thing. 5 points to Gryffindor, he said. For what did the textbook call it, Potter? Cheek. The textbook does not, in my experience, call anything cheek, sir. 5 points from Gryffindor for pedantry. Yes, sir. Snape turned away, the class breathed. In the moment of the turning, just before Snape's back came around fully, the man's gaze had snapped through Harry's eyes with the directness of a wire, and Harry had felt, for less than a second, the cool, careful pressure of another mind against his own, looking. Legilimency, crude, quick, and very accomplished. The kind of probe a man makes when he has been making them for so long he has forgotten not to. Harry had a great deal of practice at not having things found in him. He had been a god, and a god is, among other things, an architect of his own opacity. He met the probe with what looked, from inside, like the surface of a mirror set at the angle that the probe was approaching from. The probe found a face. The face was a slightly anxious 11-year-old's face. There was behind the face a wall the color of fog, and behind the wall something that might or might not be a room, and behind the room a great deal of nothing very interesting. The probe withdrew. The probe had gotten what it had come for, which was nothing, which was the worst result a probe can get because the probe cannot tell whether the absence is real or the absence is a wall. Snape gave instructions for a boil-curing potion. The class brewed boil-curing potions. Neville's exploded. Snape removed a point from Gryffindor for it. Harry's did not explode. Harry watched Snape watch his cauldron for 30 seconds longer than was warranted by Harry's apparent skill, and then watch him in his peripheral vision for the next 30 seconds, and then give up watching him and move on. Harry did not let his potion go quite right. He let it be merely good. He had no intention of being merely good. He had every intention of appearing to be the kind of student who would, if pushed, produce merely good. The class ended. Harry packed his cauldron. Ron was muttering something violent about Snape's mother. Harry tuned in for long enough to ascertain that Ron's invective was creative, but not actually obscene, and then tuned out again. In the corridor, a small voice said, beside him, "Fascinating." Harry looked down. Hermione Granger had appeared at his elbow with the suddenness of a heron that had been standing perfectly still and had only now decided to become visible. Her arms were full of books. "Fascinating. What you did to him in there, with the answers. You knew the answers." "I read the book." "You read it well," she studied him. "I read it too. I read the parts you cited. They are not laid out as answers. They require a reader to put them together. I'm a quick reader." "Yes," she said, "I think you are." She walked beside him. He did not slow down for her. She did not need slowing down for. She walked at a businesslike clip with an entire library on her hip and an air of having opinions about the corridor floor. "You did not boast," she said. "I would have boasted. I did boast. I have a small detention on Friday for boasting at Professor Flitwick. I am irritated with myself. It happens. I will not boast tomorrow. Probably wise." She gave him a sidelong look. The sidelong look was the look of someone who had felt, without yet understanding why, that the conversation she was having was older than it looked and was being granted to her on terms she had not been told. He let the look pass. "Granger. Yes. Would you like to study together? Sometimes. Not every day. I am a quick reader, but I am not, I think, a quick study." She paused. He had given her the gift of asking. She received the gift with the dignity of a person who had been asked very few times in her life so far for anything at all. "Yes," she said, "I should like that. Library, Sundays 3 to 5. Sundays 3 to 5. You will have to invite Weasley as well. He will be hurt if you do not. I had planned to." "Good." She thought about something for a moment. "You are not what I expected." "I am almost never what people expect," he said. "It is the curse of the famous infant." She laughed. The laugh was 3 breaths long. He marked it and put it away. He did not in that corridor say to her the thing he was thinking, which was that he had heard her say a phrase 3 days ago in a charms class, a phrase about the relation between intent and incantation, that had been a paraphrase of an essay Athena had given him in a garden in Athens 400 years before the city had been called Athens. He did not say it. The waking would not be hurried. The waking had to come from inside her, or it would not be hers, and a goddess who had not chosen her own waking was a hostage and not a god. The library on Saturday at 3 was almost empty. Madame Pince had taken to a far corner with a manuscript that Harry suspected, from the smell of it, had been rebound during the tutors. The 4th alcove on the 2nd floor was deep and dark, and shelved on 3 sides with books that no one had checked out in a generation. He sat with his back to the wall, and a charms text open in front of him, and waited. Daphne arrived at 8 minutes past 3. She arrived alone, which she had managed by the simple expedient of telling Tracy Davis that she was going to the loo. She set down a stack of books, sat across from him, opened the top book, and without looking at him said, "Good afternoon, husband. Good afternoon, wife. How was Snape? Sniffing. Find anything. Number good. How was the Slytherin meeting? Inane. Also good." She turned a page. Her finger ran down a column of Latin. The Latin appeared to a passing observer to interest her very much. "Quirrell," she said. "Yes, you felt the lane. I felt the lean. It is Voldemort, a piece of him, not all. He has fragmented himself and is wearing the smallest piece in a man's head until he can find a body of his own. How disgusting. Yes, he has done it before, other versions of him. Yes, they always do. They are a particular kind of small." She flipped 2 pages. A boy from the Ravenclaw 3rd year passed the alcove at a thoughtful pace on his way to a row of arithmancy texts. They both looked at their books until he had passed. "Hermione Granger," she said. "Athena, almost certainly. I will be sure within a fortnight. Approach, slow. She'll come up by herself if I help her. She's already moving. I will arrange," she said, "to be in the library on Sundays." At a different shelf. "Cedric Diggory," he said, "Hufflepuff prefect. You've felt him. He passed me in the corridor on Tuesday. He's bright-edged, not yet awake. He may be Apollo. He has the fingers. And the hum, and he was kind to a first year I saw cry yesterday. That doesn't make him Apollo. It doesn't, but they're consistent with." She made a small noise of agreement that was not quite a hum. He filed her hum next to Cedric's. Her hum was lower, more deliberate. Different gods had different rhythms in their bones, and you learned, after a long enough time, to tell who was who by the rhythm before you had finished saying hello. Twins, possibly Hermes. Combined air does a shimmer when they speak together. I think one of them, not both. The shimmer comes off the louder of the two when he is excited. Fred, probably. I have not yet had a chance to try him. I will not approach him. Number I will, through Ron. She closed her book, opened a different one. The new book was a treatise on warding by an 18th century witch with a long Welsh name. She read it, or pretended to, for about half a minute. "I dreamed," she said in a voice he had to lean to catch, "of bones." He did not lean visibly. He kept his face on his charms text. "What kind of bones? Not human, not any of ours. Older, the kind of bones that were never meant for the ground. Where? Somewhere northern, a prison, I think. There are dementors. The air smelled of dementors and wet stone. How long? 3 nights. He turned this over. He had thought of Hades earlier. He had not thought to look in a prison. He revised the picture. The shape of his inquiry adjusted. A god of the dead awake in chains in a prison of dementors would be a different proposition than a god of the dead awake in a country house in Kent, and the difference would be measured in collateral. "Hades," he said. "I think so. Awake, stirring, not yet awake. The dream came to me, I did not go to it. Will you dream again? I expect so. Tell me when you do." "Yes." She paused. She said in a voice still smaller than the last, "I did not warn him in the old life. I know. I think perhaps I will this time. Yes, he may be in a position to need warning. Yes." She closed the 18th century witch and stood up. The motion was abrupt. She was, he saw, a little disturbed, and she would not give the disturbance the dignity of being sat in. She walked away with 3 books under her arm. He did not watch her go. He turned a page in his charms text. He would meet her on Tuesday in the same place. The first flying lesson was on a Thursday afternoon under a low gray sky on a stretch of grass that the school had given to the project of children falling off brooms. Madame Hooch was a small, brisk woman with yellow eyes and the practical patience of a person who had been teaching the same lesson for 40 years and did not propose to alter the lesson on his account. The brooms on the grass were old, knotted, and resentful. He looked at them with the long, courteous attention he had given in older lives to horses he had been told he must ride and could not. "Stick out your right hand over your broom," said Madame Hooch, "and say, 'up.'" The class said up. Some brooms came up. Some brooms wriggled. Most brooms did nothing. Hermione's broom rolled over and looked away. Ron's broom hit him in the face. Neville's broom, which was the smallest and oldest, rose 3 inches and shivered. Harry sat up. The broom came into his hand the way a dog comes when called by an owner of long acquaintance who is no longer an owner and is not going to ask the dog for anything. The broom did not exactly recognize him. The broom did recognize the kind of weight about to sit on it. Wood understood weight. Wood knew kings. He took it by the handle. He did not look pleased. He had no business being pleased. Madame Hooch came down the line. She corrected Malfoy's grip with the deliberate patience of someone who had been told that Malfoy's father had given a great deal of money to the school and had decided that the sum did not entitle the son to incorrect grips. She was, Harry decided, a person to file under reliable. She did not get to demonstrate the lesson. Neville, anxious, kicked off too early. The broom decided in its old wooden mind that fear was an interesting thing to test. It went up. Neville went up with it. The broom climbed 20 feet, hesitated, and climbed further. Neville's mouth made a shape that did not quite become a scream. Hooch shouted. The broom did not listen. Hooch ran. Neville fell. Harry did not move. He did not, in fact, do anything visibly. He had stood with his broom in his hand and his hand at his side, and the grass had been against the heel of his boot, and the boy in the air had begun to fall, and Harry had thought, with the same precise economy of attention with which he had once redirected the Poe, that the boy was not going to be allowed to fall onto the gravel. Instead, the boy was going to drift, slightly off vertical, an inch or two over to the left, where the grass was thicker and the ground was softer, and where the impact, when it came, would be the impact of a tired ankle and not a broken neck. Neville drifted slightly off vertical, an inch or two over to the left, where the grass was thicker and the ground was softer. He hit the grass with the impact of a tired ankle. He whimpered. He clutched the ankle. He did not break his neck. Madame Hooch arrived, knelt, examined, and pronounced that the wrist was broken, wrist, not ankle, but Harry had not been precise about which limb, only that no part of him would be split, and helped Neville up. She marched him toward the castle and the hospital wing, and called over her shoulder, "If a single one of you puts a foot on a broom while I am gone, you will be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch." The class watched her go. The class waited. The class, in the persons of 2 specific Slytherins whose names rhymed and whose father had given a great deal of money to the school, did not wait long. "Did you see his face, the great lump?" said Malfoy. He had picked up something from the grass and was tossing it in his palm, a small glass ball, a remembrall that Neville's grandmother had sent him on Tuesday. Maybe if the fat lump had given this a squeeze, he'd have remembered to fall on his fat R. "Give it here, Malfoy," Harry said. The class went quiet. Malfoy looked at him. Malfoy did the small, ugly readjustment again. Malfoy was learning slowly what kind of voice Harry had when he was not bothering to be a child. The voice was not loud. The voice was not threatening. The voice was a voice that had been used in council to ask men to put down their weapons, and that had been obeyed by the men. Malfoy did not know any of that. Malfoy only knew that the voice had made the back of his neck go cold. He grinned anyway. Malfoy was not without courage. Most cruel men were not. "No," he said, and kicked off and went up on his broom with the remembrall in his fist. "Come and get it, Potter," Harry sighed. The sigh was small. The sigh was inward. He had not sighed visibly. The class did not see him sigh. Madame Hooch did not see him sigh, since she was already at the castle door. He took up his broom. He kicked off. He had not flown in this body before. The body would not have known what to do, except that the body had the sense memory of 2,000 years of riding faster things on stranger thermals, and the body did what the body had always done, which was tilt forward and take what the air gave. He drew level with Malfoy in 3 seconds. Malfoy, to his credit, did not try to outfly him. Malfoy threw the remembrall and threw it badly, and the small glass ball arced high and to the right. Harry banked. He could feel the broom complain. He talked briefly into the broom, a single coaxing thought. The broom remembered why it had been built. It went where he asked. He took the remembrall out of the air 4 feet from the wall of the greenhouse and pulled up. The pull-up was untidy. He let it be untidy. He was, in any case, a first year on a borrowed broom, and a first year on a borrowed broom should not produce a clean pull-up. "Potter," he looked down. McGonagall was standing in the courtyard, white with the kind of fury that came of having been called away from her transcripts at an inconvenient hour. He came down. He landed. He extended the remembrall to her without comment. She looked at him. She looked at the remembrall, she looked at the sky. "Follow me," she said. He followed her through the entrance hall. He followed her up 2 flights. He followed her into a charms classroom. She knocked on the door. She poked her head in. She said, "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick, could I borrow wood for a moment?" A burly 5th-year Gryffindor stood up, looking confused. He came out into the corridor. McGonagall took him by the elbow. "Potter," she said, "this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I have found you a seeker." Wood's face passed through 3 expressions and settled on the one that meant Christmas. She told the boys to keep quiet about it. First years did not, as a rule, play Quidditch, and she would have to clear the broom rule with the headmaster. She did not in any of this raise her voice at Harry. She did not in any of this smile at him. She had punished him, which was the form, and rewarded him, which was the point, and at the end of it she dismissed both boys with the brisk wave of a woman who had a great deal else to do. He went down the stairs with Wood. Wood was already explaining the rules of Quidditch, as if Harry might have come from a country in which Quidditch was not played. Harry let him. Wood was doing him a kindness. Wood was, without knowing it, telling him the parts of the rules that had been added since Harry had last attended a wizard sporting event 2 centuries ago in Bologna. 2 months passed in the way 2 months pass, which was small days knit together by repetition. He was by mid-October the second best in his year at charms after Hermione, the second worst at potions after Neville, an act that cost him the vigilance of pretending to ruin 3 potions a week, but he had pretended worse, the third best at Transfiguration, and competently middle in everything else. He had a small reputation among the prefects as polite. He had a smaller reputation among the Slytherins as standoffish, which had been Daphne's recommendation. Be the famous boy who is not interested in your house's enemies. Be famous and tedious. They will leave you alone. Hermione had, by mid-October, sat with him in the library on 3 consecutive Sundays. She had stopped boasting, mostly. She had let Ron beat her at chess once. She had laughed 5 separate times in his hearing, 2 of them at jokes he had made on purpose. She had begun to wear her hair tied back, which was a small thing, but it was the tying back of someone who was beginning to think she had a face worth seeing rather than hiding. He noted it. He had also begun to notice a pattern in the library in their Sunday hours, when Hermione would read for a long time in silence and then say, abruptly, a thing that she could not have known. She had said in week 2, the owl in Greek was not a bird first, it was a kind of geometry, and had then frowned at her own sentence and corrected it. What I meant was, the owl is a symbol of geometry in some folklore. I am not sure where I read that. She had not read it anywhere. The thing she had said was true, and it was a thing only Athena had ever said, in a garden in Crete, to a man in a leather apron who was now bones under 3 feet of red dust. Harry had said mildly, "That's interesting," and had moved on. He was not ready to push. He was watching the room she was making for the goddess, and the room was, week by week, becoming more ready. He had also, by mid-October, identified Cedric Diggory as Apollo with reasonable confidence. He had passed the boy in a corridor and had said, "Diggory," and the boy had turned with that small instant brightness Apollo's always had, and had grinned and had said, "Potter," and had walked on, and Harry had felt in the wake of him the small clean wash of a place where music had just been. Apollo woke gently. Apollo had always woken gently. The boy did not yet know he was a god. The boy was not yet 13. Harry would let him be a child for as long as he could. Hermes was harder. Fred Weasley was a young man with a great deal of public personality and no apparent interior. He was bright and loud and quick, and given to swatting his brother George affectionately about the head, and his eyes were the eyes of a clever boy who had been a clever boy for so long that he had gotten cleverness mixed up with worth. The shimmer was real, but it was not in him. It was in a place between the two of them that they had agreed not to investigate. Harry watched. He waited. The chance came on a Wednesday in late October. Astronomy was Wednesday at midnight on the top of the astronomy tower with Professor Sinistra, who was a small woman with a beautiful voice and a firm grasp of constellations. She had them charting the evening sky on rolls of parchment, with a star chart taped to the parapet for reference. The wind was high. The stars were very bright, the way stars get bright on a clean, cold autumn night when there is no moon yet up. He stood at the parapet and listened to the wind. The wind, in the high air over the tower, moved in patterns. He had nodded at the wind on the night he had arrived. The wind had recognized him in a small, abstracted way, the way a city recognizes one of its old children come home. He had not, in October, asked anything of the wind. The wind was not his to ask of here in this body at this age. He was content to listen. The wind on this Wednesday had something new in it. It came in from the north. It carried a flavor he had not tasted in 2,000 years. It was a sour iron flavor with a faint sweetness underneath, and when it passed over the tower it slowed, the way a man's stride slows when he passes a place where someone he loves used to live. It was not asking him anything. It was telling him a thing. It was telling him he is moving. He is awake enough to walk. He has walked. Harry stood very still at the parapet. He kept his face on his star chart. He let the wind pass. Sinistra called the class to attention. The class drew Cassiopeia. He drew Cassiopeia. His Cassiopeia was excellent because 2,000 years ago he had married into Cassiopeia and remembered the pattern from inside. He kept the excellence small. He did not have to try. His hand did the work. In the small interval before Sinistra began her lecture on the relative motions of the planets, he drifted toward the parapet on the north side of the tower and looked north. The moor under the cloud shelf out there was very dark. A long way off on a hill he could not have named, a very small light moved. The light might have been a lantern. The light might have been a will-o'-the-wisp. The light might have been nothing of that kind. He did not look at it long enough to be sure. He did not in any case need to be sure. The wind had told him the news. The light was at most confirmation. Daphne was in the Slytherin astronomy class on Thursdays. She would not be on the tower this week with him. He would have to wait 20 hours before he could tell her. He turned back to his star chart. Behind him, to his left, Fred Weasley said, very quietly to George, Tau Alpha Upsilon Tau letter 1F70, Nu letter 1F7A, Xi letter 1F00 Pi Epsilon Sigma Tau Epsilon Iota Lambda Epsilon U, letter 1F10, Pi letter 1F76 Tau letter 1F70, letter 1F44 Rho Eta. The same night sent it to the mountains. The Greek was Attic, fluent, unaccented, and exact, and it had come out of Fred's mouth without any apparent decision on Fred's part to produce Greek. George had not flinched. George had nodded, which was either because George was used to it or because George had not been listening. Harry at the parapet did not turn. He did fold himself briefly into a small private smile. The smile came up through his face without permission. He had seen that look before, on 1,000 mortal faces in 2,000 years. It was the look of a man through whom a god had begun to speak before the god had been formally introduced to the man's tenancy. Hermes was the kindest of the gods to his hosts. He would not break Fred. He would wear him a while. Fred would forget the Greek as soon as the Greek had been said, would in fact begin to forget it before he had finished saying it, and would file the dim memory of having said something strange under, yet another small and inexplicable Wednesday. Harry could work with that. Harry could draw the god out gently over weeks by speaking to him in moments when Hermes happened to be near the surface, and could make of Fred a half-conscious ally before Fred had learned the words for what was happening. Hermes would not mind. Hermes had always been amenable to a bleak conversation. Class ended. Sinistra dismissed them. The Gryffindors trooped down the spiral stair, sleepy and yawning. He let himself go down ahead of the twins, deliberately, so that Fred would, behind him, fall into the rhythm of his own descending gait, and so that he could feel on the back of his neck the small specific sensation of the god in Fred noticing the god in him. He did not look back. He did not have to. In a fourth-floor corridor on the way back to Gryffindor Tower, a girl in green and silver with very straight posture happened to be returning from somewhere private at exactly the wrong hour for a Slytherin to be in that corridor. Filch would have a great deal to say about it if he found her. He did not find her. The corridor was empty. Harry, separating from the trail of his housemates by ducking briefly into an adjacent passage, met her by an old suit of armor that had not been polished since the Tudor Wars. Hera, Zeus, he is moving. I felt it from my dorm. I came up. Did anyone number? He nodded. He has not come south yet, she said, but he is loose. Or he is loosening. Tell me when you dream again. I will. Don't go looking for him. I won't. You have always wanted to. I always have. This time, she agreed. She had a small thing in her hand, a folded square of paper. She passed it to him without ceremony. He took it. He did not open it. What is it? A list, names, the students I have ruled out. Ruled out as gods. As gods, yes. Pity. I would have liked Pansy to be Aphrodite. That would have been a poor punishment for Aphrodite. Yes, a faint laugh, 3 breaths, he marked it. Halloween is on Friday, she said. Yes, be careful. You as well. I will. Good night, wife. Good night, husband. She left. He went up the stairs to Gryffindor Tower. The fat lady, half asleep, asked him for a password without entirely committing to the asking. He gave it. He went up to his dorm. He slept an hour or two. He dreamed of bones. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Troll Mathematics. Halloween in the castle started warm and got stranger. The great hall had been hung with carved pumpkins and 1,000 live bats and a low orange light that came from nowhere in particular and stayed where it was put. Bones of an unseasonable mutton arched on the platters. The ghosts came down from their towers and wafted through the diners and complained, in friendly tones, about each other's history. Sir Nicholas drew Harry aside between courses and gave him an avuncular 20 seconds on the importance of getting one's head off properly. Harry, who had lost 3 heads in 5 different mortal lives, listened with great courtesy and made encouraging noises. He had been keeping an eye on Hermione all day. Hermione had gone to her dormitory after Charms in tears. Ron, in his Ron way, had said the wrong thing within her hearing about the Leviosa exchange that morning, and she had not been seen at supper. Lavender had reported, with the dramatic compassion girls of 11 sometimes reserved for one another, that Hermione had been crying in the loo all afternoon, which was, knowing Hermione, almost certainly an exaggeration of 40 minutes. Even an exaggerated 40 minutes was 40 minutes Harry would rather she had not spent crying in a loo. He filed this. He intended to make Ron apologize. He intended to do this without humiliating Ron, because humiliating Ron would teach Ron not to apologize for the next 10 things he said wrong. He had also been keeping an eye on Quirrell. The man had not, all evening, looked at the high table the way you look at a meal. The man had looked at it the way you look at a job. The turban was very still. Harry watched it periodically between bites and noted that Quirrell's hand had not gone for his goblet in 20 minutes. The hand had been still in his lap. The hand had been still in a way that was not nervousness. It had been still in the way a man's hand is still while his other self is doing the thinking. The doors of the great hall slammed open. Quirrell came in at a run. Quirrell had his arms half raised. Quirrell shouted, in a voice it had not previously occurred to him to use this evening, "Troll in the dungeons." Troll in the dungeons. His face was the face of a man performing a feint that he had practiced. He completed the performance by collapsing forward onto his face on the marble. The collapse was thorough. The collapse was a craftsman's collapse. Harry watched him hit the floor and did not move. The hall erupted. Dumbledore, at the center of the high table, raised his hands. Dumbledore was not a man whose voice you doubted. The hall fell quiet on his second syllable. "Prefects," he said, "lead your houses to your dormitories at once. Teachers, with me to the dungeons." The prefects led. Percy Weasley, who had been waiting his entire life for an emergency, drew himself to his full height and called for Gryffindors with the practiced authority of a man who had been the eldest of 3 hot-headed brothers and had survived. Harry stood up. Ron stood up. They followed Percy's red head out of the hall. The Slytherins were peeled off toward their own dungeon entrance by their prefects, which Harry observed with a pulse of professional irritation. Quirrell had announced, audibly, a troll in the dungeons, and the headmaster's first instruction had sent a quarter of the school's children directly toward it. He did not speak. The error was Dumbledore's, and Dumbledore would notice. Dumbledore would notice within the half hour. Halfway up the marble staircase, Ron stopped. "Hermione," Harry stopped. He had been waiting in a small private corner of his mind for Ron to remember. "She doesn't know," said Ron. "Number, she's still in the loo. Probably. On the 3rd floor. Probably. Bloody hell, Harry." The Gryffindors had already moved up. Percy was distracted with shepherding the smallest of the second years. The staircase had begun a slow shuffle that would carry the rest of them up to a different landing in a minute and a half. Harry weighed it. He had a small list. The list said on this side of the page, "Hermione will be all right. The troll is in the dungeons. The 3rd floor is far away. The tower is closer for both of you. Percy will count heads." The list said on the other side of the page, "Hermione will not be all right because trolls are not in the dungeons. Trolls are where Quirrell wanted them, and Quirrell wanted them where Quirrell could profit from them. And Quirrell had been watching the high table all night for the moment when Dumbledore would commit the staff to a place. The troll is on the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor is where Hermione is." He did not have, in that moment, the time to explain the list to Ron. "Come on," he said. They turned and slipped sideways off the staircase as it swung. They cut through a tapestry that Ron had told him about once. They ran. They made the 2nd floor corridor in less than a minute. The smell hit them first. The smell of a mountain troll is the smell of an old socks drawer left in a barn on top of a wet cellar with a dead goat in the yard, and it was unmistakable, and it was coming from the 3rd floor corridor of the girls' lavatory, and it was getting closer. Harry slowed. Ron, beside him, drew his wand. Ron's wand was, Harry was reminded, broken. Spellotape held it together. Harry did not let this fact distract him. Ron's hand on the wand was steady. The hand mattered more than the wand at the moment. The troll was 12 feet tall, skin the color of granite, lower jaw out by an inch, a tree trunk in its left fist that it was using as a club. It had a great deal of difficulty fitting through doorways. It had fit through this doorway by widening the doorway. The tiles around the doorframe were cracked and shedding in slow gravitational sheets. The troll heard them. The troll turned. The troll's eyes did the sluggish refocus of a creature that had been bred for two things, neither of which was complex thought. Behind the troll, in the center of the lavatory on the tile, in front of the porcelain bank of sinks, was Hermione Granger on her knees, her wand on the floor a foot from her right hand. Harry took it in. The mathematics of the situation was simple. The troll was between Hermione and the door. The wand was between Hermione and the troll. The wand was going to get there before her hand. He had perhaps 3 seconds before the troll completed its decision about which of the 3 children in the room was the most amusing to hit first. He had several options. The cleanest was to drop the troll where it stood, a small, precise application of force at the base of the brainstem, the equivalent of switching off a generator. He could do it. He had done it many times. He had killed older and more patient creatures than mountain trolls with less. The disadvantage was that there was no plausible source for it. He was 11. He had a wand that he had not yet, in any classroom, used for anything more advanced than Lumos. He could not, in front of Ron and Hermione, drop a fully grown troll without raising a number of questions he was not yet willing to answer. He had not yet reached the part of the year where he was willing. The second option was to keep them all alive without quite letting on what he was. This was harder because it required a creditable cover story for what had killed the troll. He had to give the troll's death to someone in the room. He had been weighing the small unconscious heat off Hermione for 2 months. He had filed the way Athena had begun, in week 2 and week 3 and week 4, to cohabit the back of a child's mind. He had filed the look on her face when she had levitated her feather, the look of a child reading from sheet music she had written herself in another life. The waking would come whenever it came. He had thought it would come in spring. He had been wrong about a great many timetables in his life. He could be wrong about this one too. The wand was a foot from Hermione's hand. Hermione, in her terror, had not yet moved for it. Hermione was a girl who had spent her life being told that knowing the answer was the answer. She was, at the moment, looking at the wand and trying to remember which spell would, in the textbook, have the desired effect on a thing 12 feet tall in a room full of porcelain. Harry did the smallest possible thing. He touched, very lightly, the back of her mind. He had not done this in a long time. He did it the way an old surgeon picks up a scalpel after retirement, with the small embarrassment of his hand remembering. He did not push the goddess forward. He did not lift any veil. He just put a finger to the inside of the door and tapped twice, very politely, and waited. The troll roared. It raised the tree trunk. Athena, who had been waking up for 2 months at the speed of a slow tide, woke up the rest of the way at the speed of a door swinging open. Hermione's wand left the floor. It did not exactly fly to her hand. It did not exactly do anything she could later have described. It rotated in the air half a degree, hung an inch above the floor, and pivoted to point at the troll's chin from below. Hermione's mouth opened. Hermione said, in a voice that had several voices laminated under it like mineral strata, Wingardium. That was all the incantation she got out. There was no second word. There was no flourish. The wand did the work that the word had not asked for. The troll's club at the apex of its rays was lifted out of the troll's grip, accelerated in a tight arc over the troll's head, and brought down, without ornament, on the back of the troll's neck. It was the sound of a cleaver going through wet wood. The troll did not have time to be surprised. The troll was already falling. The troll hit the tiles face first with a thump that knocked one of the sinks off the wall and started the bath flooding. The room rang for a long moment. Hermione was still on her knees. Her wand was hanging in the air an inch above her hand where she had not yet thought to receive it. She received it. She did not look at it. She looked at her hand. She looked at the troll. She looked very slowly at Harry, at Ron, and back at the troll and at Harry. Her face had gone the color of paper. Her eyes had behind them the small bright furnace of a person who has just understood that she is bigger than she has been told, and who has not yet decided whether the fact is a blessing or an emergency. "Bloody hell," said Ron faintly. He was the first of the 3 of them to move. He stepped forward. He stopped. He turned around. He went to Hermione. He helped her up. His face also was the color of paper, but his hand on her elbow was steady and gentle. He had done well. Harry would tell him so. The footsteps of teachers were already in the corridor. McGonagall reached the door first. McGonagall took in the scene with the velocity of a woman who had been doing this job for 46 years. She did not comment on the troll. She did not comment on the broken sink. She looked at Hermione, who was leaning on Ron, white with shock, at Ron, who was upright and apparently ready to either hit the troll again or weep in a corner, and at Harry, who was standing in the doorway with his hands in his robe, pockets the way a child stands when the child is determined to be of no further trouble. Behind her, Snape was already crouched at the troll. Quirrell, recovered, was hovering at the door making small, frightened noises in his throat. "Miss Granger," said McGonagall. "What were you thinking?" Hermione opened her mouth. The lie that came out of it was not a lie Harry had given her. The lie had come up out of her own freshly woken interior, smooth as a stone from a riverbed, with the small extra grace of a goddess of strategy whose first conscious act in 2,000 years had been to manage the optics of her own waking. She said, "I went looking for the troll, Professor. I had read about them. I thought I could deal with it. I was wrong. Harry and Ron came to find me. They would not have known it was here if I had not gone looking for it. The fault is mine." McGonagall closed her eyes. McGonagall opened her eyes. McGonagall removed 5 points from Gryffindor for the recklessness. McGonagall awarded 5 points to Gryffindor and 2 more for the bravery of Potter and Weasley, with a dryness that suggested the addition was a private joke between McGonagall and her own conscience. She told them all to go to the infirmary and have a sit-down. She told Hermione that Madame Pomfrey would give her chocolate. She turned to Snape, who was still crouched at the troll, and said, "Severus, your assessment." Snape, who had not taken his eyes off the troll's neck, said, "Curious," in a voice that meant he had a great deal more to say and was reserving it. Harry took Hermione's other elbow. The three of them went out together past the troll's bulk and along the corridor toward the infirmary. In the corridor, halfway between the lavatory and the infirmary stairs, in the small dark vestibule by a tapestry of 3 hounds, Daphne Greengrass appeared from a side passage. She had come up alone. She was, Harry realized, supposed to be in the Slytherin dungeon under lockdown. She was not in the Slytherin dungeon. She was here. Hermione, who had not yet spoken to her this term, looked at her with the small, surprised attention of a girl who had just learned several new things at once and was about to learn more. "Greengrass," said Hermione. "Granger, you're not supposed to be here." Why are you here?" "To see if you survived." Hermione paused. Hermione looked at Harry. Hermione looked at Daphne. Hermione's mouth did the small motion of a mouth getting ready to say something it had not yet decided whether to say. "Wait," said Hermione. They went instead of to the infirmary to a stone alcove off the corridor that had been forgotten by the school for 100 years and rediscovered by Daphne 3 weeks ago. The alcove had a stone bench and a window that looked out over the lake. The window could not be seen into from the corridor. Daphne knew her castle. Hermione sat down. Ron, who had been left in the corridor behind a wave of Daphne's hand and a brisk "Weasley, mind the corner, count to 200 and then knock twice," was presumably counting. Harry would have explained to Ron later. It was important that Hermione have this conversation first, alone with her own mind. "You woke me up," said Hermione after a moment. "In there, in the bathroom, with the troll, you did something. I felt it. A small touch. You did the rest. Stop talking like that." "I will try." She put her hand on her chest. She put her hand on her forehead. She did the breath of a person who had been a great deal larger than herself for 90 seconds and was not yet sure whether to put the largeness back into the box. "I remember a city," she said. "I remember a city by a sea. I remember a man. I remember I had a bird. I had a tree. Yes, I had what is the word for a council? A council. I sat at there were 12 seats. I had a brother. Yes, you are my," she stopped. She looked at Daphne. She frowned. "You are my stepmother," Daphne said mildly, and not as a rule an enthusiastic one. Hermione looked rather wildly at Harry. "And you are, yes, I think the polite word is your father. You." "Yes, I do not in any way approve of you," said Hermione, in a voice that was, at that exact moment, perfectly Athena's, and which she did not know was Athena's, and which was going to embarrass her in 12 seconds when she remembered she had said it. "Yes," said Harry mildly. "I have heard that before." She pressed both hands over her face. She did not cry, although her shoulders moved. It was not crying. It was the small mechanical adjustment of a goddess who had, in 2,000 years of sleep, become a girl, and who was now relearning the chassis. He let her. Daphne let her. The two of them sat on either side of her on the stone bench and did not touch her, because Athena had, in her 90 lives, made a virtue of not being touched without permission. When she lowered her hands, her face was raw, but the eyes behind it had become, in stages, the eyes of a person who had several centuries of administrative skill to deploy and had begun to inventory them. "Right," she said. All right, I am Hermione Granger. I am 11. I am also, yes, I am also that." "Both are true. I will sort the relation later. There is, presumably, a war. There is, and you are running it. I am noticing it. I am not running it yet. I am still sorting names. Names? How many of us are awake? How many are asleep? How many are in dangerous heads?" She blinked. "Cedric Diggory. Apollo, yes. He came up to me on the stairs in week 3 and asked if I'd had enough sleep. I had not had enough sleep. He looked at me as if he had heard the inside of my night. Apollo, said Harry, has always been kind to women who have not slept. Fred Weasley, Hermes, probably, half awake. I don't know any of the others. I have suspicions about a Hufflepuff 4th year, and about the Bloody Baron, and about a witch in Diagon Alley who sells me chocolate. We will work through them. I would like your help. Yes, and about Sirius Black. She looked at him. The name had been in the Daily Prophet this morning, a small column on page 3. Sirius Black seen in Calais, Ministry denies. Hermione, who read the Prophet for the 30 seconds it took her to find the charms column, had clocked the name without registering it. She registered it now. Hades, said Daphne. You are sure, Hermione said. I dreamed of bones. He has been moving. He may be already out of his prison. He will in any case find us before we find him because he has always found us first. And he is sane. He has always been sane, said Harry. Hades has always been sane. He has not, in any of his iterations, been the problem, Hermione thought. She had her hands flat on her knees. She had her head tilted half an inch. She was making a list. He could feel the list happening. The list-making had always been the most readily recognizable thing she did. He let her. The bench was cold against the back of his thighs and he leaned into it and let her work. So, she said after a minute, we are 3. 3 of us are awake. 1 is half awake. 1 is awake but in chains, possibly. You and Daphne are not a couple. You and Daphne were a couple in the previous epoch. You have decided not to be a couple again. Is this a stable decision? It is. It is not, I will note for the record, the first time you have made the decision. It is the first time we have made it without lying to each other about it. All right, she folded her hands. I will treat it as load-bearing. I will not in council attempt to reason about the marriage as variable. Voldemort. A small piece of him is in Quirrell's turban. He did the Halloween troll thing for distraction. He is interested in something on the 3rd floor. We will find out what. The 3rd floor corridor is forbidden under penalty of death, said Hermione, per the welcome speech. I noted the wording. Yes, it is an indecorous wording. It is meant to be, Harry said. Dumbledore is not subtle when subtlety is unhelpful, and you trust him. I trust him to have read more books than I have in this body. I do not trust him to know what I am. He will eventually. He will eventually. She nodded. She took a breath. The breath was deep. The breath was the breath of a woman who had reorganized an interior pantry in 15 minutes and was about to start cooking. I wish to be useful, she said. I will not be useful to you yet. I am still by half 11. The 11 is not a posture. I will need a fortnight. Take a month. I will take 3 weeks. I will be observable and tidy. I will keep up at school. I will boast a little less. I will continue to be Ron Weasley's friend, who in the absence of his apology I had not been planning to be. He'll apologize. I expect so. I will not require him to mean it the first time. That is gracious of you. I am not, in fact, gracious, said Hermione, but I am pragmatic, which is sometimes the same thing in this small a room. Daphne made the noise she made when she was amused, but was not going to let her face know it. Harry filed the noise. The noise was new. The noise was the noise of an old colleague pleased with a junior's first competent meeting. Council of 3, said Hermione. Council of 3, said Harry. Hours. Sundays in the library 3 to 5 for the appearance of the thing. Tuesdays at 9 in the abandoned charms classroom on the 4th floor. Other times by arrangement, by note, in the 7th volume copy of the Standard Book of Spells in the restricted section, which neither of you have yet thought to look in. You did not, in the corridor a minute ago, know what the restricted section was. My 11 is competent, Greengrass. My 6,000 is competent at speed. I withdraw the implied insult. I accept the withdrawal. They sat for a moment. The window over the lake had begun to gray with the first edge of moon. The castle was very quiet. Somewhere down the corridor Ron was conscientiously counting. Harry, said Hermione after the quiet. Yes, you did the touch in the bathroom. I did, without my consent. Yes, it was useful. It was. I would prefer, she said, that you not do it again without asking. All right, even if I am about to be hit with a club. All right, I would prefer the club. Understood. I am Athena, she said, more to herself than to him, and I will be hit with my own clubs from now on. Understood, she nodded once. She stood up. She smoothed her robes. She walked to the alcove arch and looked back. I will go and get my chocolate at the infirmary, she said. Madame Pomfrey will be displeased to be kept waiting. Greengrass. Granger. It is, I find, a small comfort to have the counsel of someone who can be relied upon to dislike me competently. I have always, said Daphne, disliked you with the greatest possible respect. I know, said Hermione and went. A pause. Daphne beside Harry on the bench exhaled. The exhale was not relief. The exhale was the noise of a woman setting down a bag. That went better than the last time, she said. Considerably better. She was easier to find this round. She is older inside her than before. She did the work in her sleep. She will be useful very fast. Yes, he stood. He went to the alcove arch. He looked into the corridor. Ron, 20 feet away, was on number 147, 1 foot tapping. Harry knocked twice on the stone. Ron knocked twice back. 200, Harry called mildly. Just got there, called Ron. You are a dreadful liar, Weasley. Yeah, come on, infirmary. In the morning, Harry took the long way down to breakfast. The long way went past Hagrid's hut. The hut at 7:30 was already releasing smoke from its chimney. Hagrid was an early riser, and the smell of frying bacon and something Harry chose, charitably not to identify, came out the door in a warm column. He knocked. Hagrid opened the door in a vast checked dressing gown. "Awry, bit early for visitin'. I'd hoped to walk Fang if you'd let me, before classes." He'd like that. Hagrid considered him. The consideration was kindly. "You all right then, after the troll and all? Tired?" Thaw's a body's reaction to a troll. He let Harry into the hut. The hut was the inside of a barn that had been furnished by someone who liked his furniture to be capable of bearing weight. Fang, the boarhound, was draped on a rug like a small wet rug himself, and rose to greet Harry with the slow dignity of a dog who had been a duke in a previous engagement. Harry knelt, scratched the dog under the jaw, and let Fang slobber on his sleeve, which was the price of admission. "Hagrid, how many heads has Fluffy got?" Hagrid blinked. "How do you know about Fluffy? You said his name on the train, your friend you called him." "Did I? 3 times. Hagrid scratched his beard. 3 heads, got him off a Greek chap in a pub in Athens. Lovely fellow, wouldn't take money for him in the end. Said the dog'd been wantin' a man with a beard, and I had a beard, and Thaw was Thaw. He gave you a Cerberus." I suppose he did. You shouldn't ha' been told Thaw, Harry. You shouldn't ha' know any of Thaw." "I won't tell, the man with no money." "Did he give you a name? Just Sirius, like Th Star." Harry kept his face flat. He scratched Fang's ear. He was very good in this body at scratching dogs while keeping his face flat. He did, briefly, in the small chamber of his mind, salute the absent Hades, who had been moving for longer than Harry had thought, and who had placed his pet in a man's house without telling the man what he had placed, and who had given Hagrid a friend. "Walk Fang for me." "Yes. Don't go near the 3rd floor." "I won't." He took Fang on the lead and walked him down to the lake, and let him chase a goose for 100 yards along the shore, and came back. Hagrid was, by then, dressed and on his way up to the castle. Harry handed back the lead. Hagrid clapped him on the shoulder and nearly drove him into the ground. Harry recovered. He went up the path. He folded the small new piece of intelligence that Sirius Black, in some prior moment of liberty before the Azkaban capture had finished, had walked into a pub in Greece and given a man named Hagrid a 3-headed dog, into the file at the back of his mind, and pressed the file shut. 2 days passed. The school adjusted to itself. Hermione, on Sunday in the library, sat at the table opposite Harry with a cup of pumpkin juice, did not speak, did her charms homework in 20 minutes flat, looked up, said, "I have a list," and produced a roll of parchment 6 feet long. The list was tidy. The list was indexed. The list had column headings: NAMED, probable, possible, ruled out, and a 5th column called persons of note not yet, PLACED. Sirius Black was at the top of the NAMED column with a small parenthetical Hades, confirmed by H, by D, by Dream. Cedric Diggory was at the top of the probable column. Pansy Parkinson was, at Daphne's specific request, near the bottom of the ruled-out column. "This is good work," Harry said. "It is mediocre work," said Hermione, "but it is useful. We can refine it." Refine it. She refined it. The library hours had not, for 2 months, contained another mind that worked at quite this rhythm. He had forgotten the small, specific pleasure of working with Athena. The pleasure was not warmth, exactly. The pleasure was the relief of a man whose maths had never quite added up running the same maths past someone whose maths always added up. He let himself enjoy it for 3 minutes. He filed the enjoyment. He went on. Tuesday at 9 in the abandoned Charms classroom on the 4th floor, the council met for the first time in earnest. Hermione had a candle. Daphne had a small detection charm she had drawn on the floor in chalk. Harry sat on the desk with his ankles crossed and listened. "The 3rd floor corridor," Hermione said. "We need to know what is there." "It is guarded." "By what?" "At minimum," said Daphne, "by a Cerberus." Both of them looked at her. "You are very sure," said Hermione. "I felt it through the floor when I went down for breakfast on Wednesday. 3 throats, old breath." Someone was standing on the other side of the door, Hagrid, perhaps, and the heads were quiet, which means the dog knows him. The dog is one of Hagrid's. I would bet a year of pocket money it is one of Hades' breeds. Hades does not lend his hounds to schoolmasters often, but he has a soft spot for large men with beards. Hagrid would not know. Hagrid would know in his bones. Hagrid would not know in words. Hades has a gift for placing his pets in the homes of men who do not realize they have welcomed gods into their kennels. What is the dog guarding? Said Hermione. Something Voldemort wants. Why? He wants a body. He wants a body that will not die again. There are in the corpus 3 or 4 objects that produce that result. None of them are good. All of them are stored, ordinarily, in places guarded by professionals. If Dumbledore has moved one of them into Hogwarts under a Cerberus and a forbidden corridor, it is because Dumbledore expects Voldemort to come for it, and would prefer Voldemort to come for it here, where Dumbledore is, rather than where Dumbledore is not. Dumbledore is laying a trap. Yes, for Voldemort. Yes, with our school as the cheese. With our school as the cheese. Hermione looked at the ceiling. She did the half-second of cross-referencing she did when she was working her way toward an opinion she did not want to have. Then she said, "It is, perhaps, not as objectionable as it sounds. The trap is real. The dog is real. The corridor is forbidden. The students have been warned. The students are children, but the alternative is leaving the cheese unguarded in another building, which is a different bad answer. It is not a good answer. It is a Dumbledore answer. Yes, he will need to know," said Daphne, "that Voldemort has a piece of himself in Quirrell's head. He does not, I think, currently know. He suspects. He does not know. We will need to tell him, without telling him what we are. Quite how." Harry tapped the desk under his palm. He had been tapping it slowly for the last 5 minutes. The tapping was an old habit, an old rhythm. He was thinking. "I will write him a note," he said. "Tomorrow, polite. Anonymous, childish enough to be plausible, specific enough to be useful. He will get it. He will work. He will be intrigued by us. He will be intrigued by me already after the troll. Snape said the word curious in the bathroom for a reason. They will compare notes by Wednesday at the latest. He will set about finding out what you are. Yes, he will not find out unless you let him. But he will try. And the trying will be useful. It will keep him watching me, which means he will be watching when Quirrell tries to come through the corridor for the cheese. We will know when. Dumbledore will move first. That gives us cover." He looked at the candle. The flame had bent faintly in a draft that no other part of the room had felt. He recognized the bend. He did not remark on it. The candle steadied. The room steadied. He stood up. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Note to Dumbledore. Tomorrow afternoon, Hermione, you and I have a conversation in his office that will look like an apology for being in the bathroom. All right. He will not call me to his office for that. He will if you ask. I will have McGonagall ask. Bossy of you." "I have been bossy for 60,000 years. "Yes," she stood. Daphne stood. The chalk on the floor, when nudged with the toe of Daphne's shoe, lit briefly at one of the runes. The rune showed a small, unsettled blue. Daphne looked at the rune. Daphne looked at Harry. "Something is in this castle," she said, "that I do not yet have the name of. How close? 2 floors up. Older than us. Older than 3 of us. Yes, we will look in the morning. In the morning." They left the classroom one at a time, 10 minutes apart by 3 different staircases. The night took them. The castle, untroubled, slept. The ghosts went on their rounds. Filch's cat made its small, careful patrol. In the 3rd-floor corridor, behind a locked door, a 3-headed dog yawned in concert, and one of its breaths brushed the door and made it warm. In a tower to the east, a man with a long silver beard sat at a window with a glass of mead and a half-completed book of crossword puzzles, and stared for a long time at a plate of marzipan. He had been at the troll. He had seen the troll's neck. He had seen Hermione Granger's wand on the floor. He had seen, on the way out of the lavatory, a small thing he was not yet sure he had really seen, which was Harry Potter standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, and an expression that did not, at any point, register surprise. Albus Dumbledore was not yet ready to ask the question that the expression had put in his mouth. He set the question gently on the windowsill beside his mead and let it cool. He intended to come back to it tomorrow. Chapter 3 End tomorrow. Polite. Chapter 4. The old quarrel. The first frost came on a Thursday and it stayed. By the 2nd week of November, the lake had a thin, bright crust at the edges in the morning, and the path from the castle to the boathouse crunched under boots, and the dark willow on the south bank wore a coronet of ice that broke off in pieces all afternoon and made small shattered noises in the reeds. The Quidditch season was 3 weeks out. Wood had Harry on a school broom in the middle of the pitch at 6 in the morning every day. Wood was not a kindly coach. Wood was a thorough one. Harry put up with him. Saturday afternoon, with the team's permission, he went down to the lake alone. Daphne was there before him, sitting on a flat rock with her knees together and her gloved hands folded over her knees and her breath making a small visible cloud. She had a green scarf wound twice around her throat. He had a red one. The colors against the lake's gray were the colors that had been chosen for them by the Sorting Hat, and they had agreed not to make jokes about it. He sat down on the rock beside her, leaving a careful 8 inches between them. She did not turn. Wife, husband, it is going to be a long winter. They are all long in this country. They were not in Greece. Greece is not what it was. No, he said, it is not. For a while they did not speak. The lake did the small things lakes do under cold light. A fish jumped in the shallows and made a single round tone. Somewhere on the far shore a heron shifted its weight. The willow shed an ice piece that pinged off its own root. He had not in this body sat by water with her before, and he had not realized until this moment how often he had done it in older bodies. The body remembered the sitting. The body adjusted itself, without consultation, into the same relative angle to her that had been the angle for many epochs. He noticed. He let it. I want to talk about it, she said. All right, not the marriage. All right, the end of it. He nodded. Although she could not see him, she could see his cloud of breath, and his cloud of breath nodded. You were unfaithful, she said. I have spent 2,000 years deciding what to do with that fact. I have decided to put it down. All right, I am not going to make you apologize again. I am not going to demand the apology. The apology was, in the older life, a tax on you that I levied because I was angry, and the anger was honest, but the tax was not always proportional. I am giving up the tax. He thought for a moment. He thought of the woman she had been on the day she had bargained with the river. He thought of his own face, in the long pool he had stared into for a century after she had stopped speaking to him, and the face he had practiced into something that could be looked at by a child. He had nothing to say that was useful, so he said the only thing that was true. I was unfaithful in many ways. The infidelity was the small face of the failure. The large face was that I was not the husband I told you I would be. I told you I would be one, I was something else. Yes, I am sorry, not as a tax, as a fact. Yes, I am glad we are not married now. So am I. I think we will be friends in this life. I think we will. A long quiet. The fish jumped again. The heron on the other side decided against the day and lifted off and went, slow and ragged, toward the forest. I threw your sons off Olympus, she said. Yes, I am sorry. I had given you cause. Cause is not the same as right. Number, I will not do it again. There will not be another Olympus. There will be, she said. You and I both know there will be. There always is. It will not be in the same place. It will not have the same furniture. It will be there, and in this one I will not throw your sons off it. Hera, yes, I will not give you cause. She turned her head then. She looked at him directly in the cold afternoon light, and he saw her face the way a man sees the face of an old colleague after a long absence. Every line in it, the line he had remembered, but every line in it new in a small specific way. She had been in this life given a child's face on which the goddess had begun to write again, and he watched the writing happen. I will not in this life expect you to be perfect, she said. I will expect you to be honest with me. I will expect you to ask before you spend one of our reputations. I will expect you to call me before you call any of the others when the work needs the counsel of someone who has already forgiven you. All right, and I will hold you to a higher standard than you would hold yourself. All right, as I have always done, as you have always done. Better this time, better this time. She put her gloved hand over his gloved hand briefly. The two gloves were not the same shape. They had the small mismatched warmth of two gloves that did not, ordinarily, touch. She removed her hand. She stood. I am going up to the library, she said. Hermione has produced a second list, and the second list has, between her old hand and her new hand, 3 small errors I would like to correct without her seeing me correct them. Be merciful. I have always been merciful with Athena. Granted. She went. He sat for another 20 minutes by the lake. The willow shed another ice piece. He thought about the 3rd floor and the dog and the man with no money who had given the dog away. He thought about a brother he had not seen in a great while, who had been awake longer than they had thought, and who was, even now, walking through England under cover of Dementor and rumor, and who would either find them or not. He thought about a son he had lost and another son he had lost, and 2 sons he had had who were, even now, sleeping in the bodies of mortal boys somewhere in this island, and who would, when they woke, have his face and not his face. He thought about his daughters. He thought about the drift of his old loves through this small new world. He thought about the small angle of attention an aging man pays to the rim of his cup of tea before the cup is brought to his mouth, and how, in this body, he was going to have a great deal of practice at that angle. He stood. He brushed frost off the seat of his robes. He went up the path. The school waited. The first Quidditch match of the season was the Saturday after the Saturday of the Lake. Gryffindor played Slytherin. The Slytherin team had been at Hogwarts longer than the trees, and most of them had been on the team since the previous summer when they had been 6 or 7. Wood briefed his squad in the changing room with the energy of a man who had not slept since the team list had gone up. Harry sat on the bench and listened to roughly half. The other half he spent considering the small fact, recently confirmed, that the only Slytherin on the staff who had any reason to want him dead was Snape, and Snape had been working through a list of grievances for 30 years and would not be likely to produce a new one this morning. The match began. The crowd made the sound stadium crowds make, a long fluctuating chord. He went up on his nimbus into the cold, clean, high air over the pitch and breathed it in, and the air remembered him, the way it had remembered him on the night he had arrived, and his body in the borrowed broom did the thing it had been quietly doing for 2,000 years, which was, it flew. He stayed high. He hovered, he watched. The snitch made its first appearance 40 seconds in, near Slytherin's left goalpost, and was gone again before the Slytherin seeker had finished pretending he had not seen it. Harry had noted the location. He filed it. He moved his attention to the chasers. Angelina Johnson had a left elbow that gave away her angles a half-second before she made them. Marcus Flint had a habit of leaning into his handle when he was about to foul. He filed both. He had in older lives been a general of cavalry. He had read writers' bodies as a man reads a page. 5 minutes in, his broom kicked. The kick was small. The kick was the kind of kick a flea gives a dog. He had felt worse on much older brooms. The kick repeated itself 10 seconds later. The kick repeated itself 10 seconds after that. By the third repetition, he had identified the rhythm. It was a pulse, an external pulse, very precisely tuned to the broom's resonance, applied with a craftsman's tongue. A hex, small, continuous, aimed. He scanned the staff stand. Most of the staff were watching the match. McGonagall had her arms folded. Flitwick was applauding. Hagrid was shouting Gryffindor encouragements at a volume that was inaudible from here, but that produced visible pulses in his beard. Snape, in the third row of the staff stand, was watching Harry. Snape's lips were moving. 2 seats down from Snape, Quirrell was watching Harry. Quirrell's lips were also moving. Quirrell's face was the face of a man performing prayer, but the prayer was not aimed up, it was aimed at the broom. Quirrell was the source. Snape was, by the look of him, working a countercurse against Quirrell. Snape had also clocked the source. Snape, of all people, was, for once and on this single occasion, on Harry's side. Harry made a small private resolve to thank Snape later, in some fashion that did not involve actually thanking him. The pulse increased. The broom bucked. He could ride it, he was riding it, but Quirrell was patient and the broom would, in the end, throw him whether he could ride it or not. A first year on a nimbus would not, in the eyes of the match, have any reason to remain seated through that pulse. He would fall. He would fall from a height at which a fall, even broken by spell, would put him in the infirmary for a week. The broken arm was, he understood, the goal, not the death, the injury. Quirrell wanted him out of the air for the next month, while something on the 3rd floor advanced. He made a decision. He made the decision in 1 second. He chose, this time, to fly through. He leaned forward. He braced. The broom tried on the next pulse to throw him. He stayed. He had not in this body tested the broom. He tested it now. He let the small private push of his palm against the handle blade very slightly into the wood of the broom, the way an experienced rider's weight does the work that the bridle is supposed to do. The broom calmed. The pulse continued. The broom did not buck again. The pulse, finding no purchase, doubled in intensity. He matched it. Quirrell pushed. He did not push back, he simply did not move. Quirrell pushed harder. He simply did not move. After a quarter of a minute of this, he could feel, across the pitch, Quirrell beginning to bewildered and Snape beginning to grin. The snitch by then was at the south end of the pitch, hovering above the Slytherin keeper. Harry had been waiting. He turned. He dove. He descended at the angle a stooping hawk descends, and in his hand on the broom in the descent, he allowed, for the briefest possible flicker, a single tone of the voice that the wind had recognized on his arrival. Just one tone. Just a small concession to himself, after a quarter of a minute of being pushed by an upstart parasite, which is more than I am supposed to take. The tone said, "But I have taken it, let us be done." The wind under the pitch moved. It moved by very little. It moved enough to put the snitch directly into his outstretched hand, without the snitch having been required to do anything strenuous about it. The crowd roared. He pulled up. He landed. He came down with the snitch in his fist and held it up, and the team mobbed him, and Wood was crying, and somewhere in the staff stand Quirrell was looking at him with the perfectly empty face of a man who had felt, for 1 second, a thing he could not catalog, and Snape was looking at him with the perfectly polite face of a man who had felt the same thing, and was now writing it down in a different, much more dangerous file. He had pushed too far. He noted it. He filed it. He let himself be carried off the pitch on the team's shoulders. Cedric Diggory came up to him in the corridor outside the changing room after the noise had dispersed. "Potter, Diggory, that was good flying. Thank you, your broom was hexed. I noticed too. I felt it from the Hufflepuff stand, like a tuning fork in the chest. I have lately been feeling things in the chest." Cedric paused. He was a tall, well-built fourth year with a face the easy good shape of a woodcut, and his eyes, in the corridor light, had become, in the last week, the eyes of a person to whom things were beginning to be evident. "Something has been waking up in me." Harry looked at him for a long moment. The corridor was empty. A house elf was attending to a stain on the wall 30 yards down. Cedric was not making it a question. "Yes," Harry said, "I have been hearing music when there isn't any. Yes, I have been able to tell before they speak what the second years are about to ask. Yes, it has not been distressing me. I find I am equipped for it. You always have been, brother. "You and I will have a conversation," said Cedric, "this evening by the lake if you can spare a half hour. I have questions. I expect you have a great many of them." 5:30. 5:30. Cedric clapped him on the shoulder. The clap was the small, kind, unself-conscious clap of a friend who had had several centuries to practice the gesture, and was, in this small body, only just beginning to find it again. He went on down the corridor. Harry, for half a second after he had gone, allowed himself a small private smile that did not, this time, ask permission. He went up to the tower. The common room was an extended celebration of his having caught the snitch. Wood was telling everyone, in tones of a man who was about to make a religious order, that there had never been a first-year seeker like Harry. Fred and George had produced fire whiskey. Percy was confiscating it. The fire whiskey reappeared 4 minutes later in a different cup. Harry got pulled in. He laughed where laughing was the right answer. He drank a fingernail of fire whiskey for tactical reasons. Hermione, who had been watching the match from a position 3 rows up and to the left of where Quirrell had been sitting, slid alongside him at one point and murmured, "Snape was countering. Quirrell was casting. I cross-checked the lip movement against the published curse list. Quirrell's was the curse conturbo volandi. It was effective. You broke it. We will discuss how later." He nodded. She slid away again. Ron, at his elbow, had not heard. Ron was telling Seamus the story of the snitch in a way that featured Harry prominently as a cousin. Ron had not, that day, been at his best. Ron had been left out of the changing room, and then had been crowded out at the breakfast table, and then had spent the match in the spectator stand with Hermione, and Hermione had spent the entire match writing a list. Ron's day in his accounting had been a small day. Harry had been present in person for none of it. Ron's mood, by the time the celebration rolled around, was outwardly hilarious and inwardly mid-November. Harry caught the underweather. He filed it. He drew Ron at the edge of the celebration, toward an armchair, and gave him a chocolate frog, and listened to him for 10 minutes. The listening was the right thing. The listening fixed perhaps a third of the problem. The other 2/3 would not be fixed by chocolate frogs. This was, Harry thought, how a friendship between a god and a mortal began to fail. It failed not because the god neglected the mortal, but because the god could not, in the long run, scale to the mortal's sense of being seen. He had been here before. He had been here many times. He had buried the men who had loved him. He was not, he resolved, going to bury this one. After dinner, he went down to the lake. Cedric was already there with 2 thermoses of cocoa. He handed one to Harry. The lake was darker than it had been at Saturday's interview, and a small lid of ice had thickened along the edge, and the willow had finished its day's shedding. 5:30, said Cedric. 5:30. How long have you known? About you, a month, perhaps a little more. And about you, since the Hogwarts Express. On the train, mid-journey with Daphne Greengrass. Daphne Greengrass. Hera. Cedric took this in. He nodded. I am not surprised. You and she had a friendship I did not always like. I know. She is friend to me again, not wife. I am glad to hear it. Are you, I should be the one asking, are you all right, Apollo? The boy sipped his cocoa. He looked out across the lake. He was, to all visible appearances, a fourth-year prefect with broad shoulders and an unfair number of teeth, but in the cold blue of the afternoon's last light he was also, very clearly, a god whose face had begun to remember what it was for. I am all right, he said. I came up gentler than I expected. I have been singing in the shower in the morning. I have been writing music on the inside of my eyelids. There is, I will tell you a thing. There is, in this body, a thing of the body that is not yet awake. I have not yet seen it. I do not know what it is. Something to do with the future, I suspect. Cassandra used to feel it as an ache between her shoulder blades. I am lately feeling that ache. I have not gone looking for what it produces. Don't yet. Number, I am not foolish about prophecy. You have at times been foolish about prophecy. I have, but I have learned I will not be again. A silence. A duck on the lake muttered something, half asleep. Hermione Granger. Athena. 2 weeks past. The troll incident. Sirius Black. Hades. We are all three of us fairly sure. He has been moving for some time. He may yet come south. Voldemort. Yes, I know nothing about him. He is a small upstart with 7 pieces and a parasite in Quirrell's turban. Then he will be very surprised. Yes, how shall we play it? Harry looked at him. Cedric was a good-natured boy with the gift of asking, in the right tone, the question that needed asking. He had always been one of the easier of the brothers to work with. Harry had not, in 2,000 years of half-lives, missed any of them with quite the specific pang he had missed Cedric. Slowly, he said, quietly. We will not announce ourselves. We will not move first. We will let Voldemort spend himself against the room, and we will be the room. Sirius, if he comes south, we welcome, carefully. I have not yet had the conversation with Hades. I do not know if he will be in his right mind. He has been in Dementor air for 10 years. Will he? Hades has always come back into his right mind eventually. Has he forgiven you for the unintended slight? Many times. Has he forgiven you for the intended one? Once. We will have to see whether the forgiveness has held. I will help where I can. I know. Brother. They drank cocoa. The ice at the edge of the lake made a small, contented noise. The two of them watched the water and did not, in those minutes, say anything else, and the not saying was a kind of saying that Harry had not done with one of his own in a long time. Christmas came, and the school in stages emptied. Most of the Gryffindors went home. Ron, whose parents were in Romania visiting his older brother Charlie, stayed at the school. Hermione, after a long interior debate she did not voice, went home. Daphne, after a longer interior debate that she announced briefly to Harry on Monday and then did not discuss, went home as well. The Greengrass family had a Christmas tradition that involved a great deal of formal posing in front of a large fireplace, which she said she could endure for 1 season more if she did not have to do it twice. Cedric went home. The tower felt larger than it was and quieter. He spent his Christmas Eve walking through the castle. He had since November been in the habit of walking the castle at night when most of it was sleeping. The castle, alone, had a different rhythm than the castle full of students. The portraits whispered. The stairs moved less, on principle, after midnight. The ghosts wandered to their preferred haunts and rehearsed their old grievances in private. He found that the castle in these hours was beginning to recognize him. Doors he had not opened a half-inch when he passed. Lamps brightened slightly in a corridor he had walked twice. A tapestry on the 3rd floor, 2 doors down from the locked door behind which Fluffy slept, lifted an inch on a draft that was not a draft. He filed all of it. He did not press. The castle was, he thought, an old being with its own opinions, and he had no business asking it for things it had not yet offered. On the night of the 23rd, in a corridor he had not walked before, he found a door that was new. The door was on the 7th floor. Behind a tapestry of trolls in tutus that he had been told, by Ron, was an old joke of Barnabas the Barmy. The door had not, on his previous walk-by, been in this section of stone. He paused. He considered. He had not, when he had last walked this corridor on Tuesday, been thinking of a particular thing. He was now thinking of one. He had been thinking of it all evening. He had been thinking that he wanted, before he went to bed, to look at his parents. He had not lived as Harry Potter for more than 10 weeks before the request had begun to climb up out of the back of him. The request had not been enormous. The request had been small and persistent, the way a child's wishes are. He had filed it under things to attend to in the spring. He found, looking at the new door, that the door had been built, perhaps by the castle, perhaps by something older, to receive the request, and to consider whether to grant it, and to charge a small, careful price. He went in. The room was empty except for an enormous mirror in a heavy gold frame, leaning against the far wall. He stopped at the threshold. He had heard rumor of this room. He had not on any walk looked for it. He did not, in this body, particularly want to look for it. He had, in older lives, looked into mirrors of this kind. He had in older lives found in them what he had wanted. He had in older lives found the wanting more difficult to set down afterward than he had expected. He stepped further in. He did not look at the mirror's surface. He looked at its frame. He looked at the engraved letters at the top. ERISEDSTRAEHRUOYTUBCAFRUOYTONWOHSI. He read the words backward. He read what they said. He nodded once mildly. He looked then at the surface. He did not see his parents. He saw instead a hillside in the eastern Mediterranean 2,400 years ago, on a clear morning in the second week of spring. He saw a court he had built. He saw a council in session. He saw the table at which he had, every spring and every autumn, sat with his brothers and sisters and his children. He saw the table whole. He saw himself at the head of it. He saw Hera at his right. He saw Apollo at her right. He saw Athena at his left. He saw Hermes. He saw Demeter. He saw Hephaestus. He saw Ares. He saw faces that he had not seen in 2,000 years. He saw, at the foot of the table, a child he had not been able to save, smiling at him and not blaming him. He saw the table whole. He had not, in 2,000 years of mortal lives, allowed himself to know that he wanted to see the table whole. He stood in front of the mirror for a long time. He did not, while he stood there, weep. He had in older lives wept. He had wept in front of mirrors of this kind. He did not weep at this one. He was not, this time, in any condition to give the mirror that piece of him. He stood and he looked, and he did the small interior work of saying yes to the wanting and of, very carefully, putting the wanting back down on the floor of his ribs and closing the box around it. He stepped sideways. He stopped looking at the surface. He looked at the frame. He thought, eventually, not now. He turned. He walked out of the room. The door, when he had crossed the threshold, vanished. The tapestry of trolls in tutus settled back into its bored pretense. The corridor was empty. He went back down to Gryffindor Tower the long way, past 3 of his usual landmarks, and let the castle's small new attention to him fall away. By the time he reached the fat lady, the small new pressure in his chest had loosened enough that he could speak the password without a wobble. The fat lady, half asleep, let him in. He sat by the dying fire in the common room for a while. Ron, asleep on the rug, had pulled a blanket halfway over himself, and a bishop's mitre, which he had won at chess off Harry an hour earlier, lay on the hearthstone beside him. Harry covered Ron the rest of the way with the blanket. He took the mitre off the hearthstone. He set the mitre on the table, where Ron would find it when he woke. He went up to bed. In the morning, when he came down to breakfast, he found on his place at the long table a small wrapped package and a note in green ink in a hand he half recognized. "I wish you a Merry Christmas, husband. The package is honey biscuits. Tracy's mother bakes them. They are good even though you do not deserve them. Your brother left a letter. I have hidden it in our 7th volume." He took the note, folded it, and pocketed it. He took the package, opened it, and ate a biscuit. The biscuit was excellent. He went after breakfast to the restricted section, by way of the invisibility cloak that had appeared on his bed during the night with no card. He did not yet know where the cloak had come from, and he was, in this body, of 2 minds about it, but the cloak fit. He used it. In the restricted section, in the 7th volume of the Standard Book of Spells, a book that had not been opened in 50 years, he found a folded piece of black paper with no envelope, sealed with gray wax. The wax had no sigil. The gray was the precise gray of long-dead embers. He opened the letter. It said, in a hand he had not seen in 2,000 years, "Brother, I am awake. I am south. We will speak when the snow goes. Be careful with the upstart. Do not this time kill anyone for me. I am not sure I would still want it." He folded the letter. He held it unmoving for a moment. He sat down on the floor of the restricted section, with the volume open on his knees and the cloak around his shoulders, and let his breath cloud in the cold air, and noted in the back of his mind that his hand had not been steady when he had folded the letter, and that there was no shame in this. He let the unsteadiness move through him. He stood. He returned the volume to the shelf. He left the restricted section. He went up to Gryffindor Tower and woke Ron, and convinced him to come down to a Christmas breakfast that was, in the absence of 3/4 of the school, the best Christmas breakfast Harry had eaten in this body or any of the others. Ron had 2 helpings of bacon. Hagrid sent up a plate of treacle fudge. Dumbledore was at the high table in a hat that had at the brim a small sprig of holly he had grown himself. Dumbledore caught Harry's eye once across the hall. The catch lasted a half-second. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly, in the small, courteous way of a man acknowledging a colleague. Harry inclined his. The hat, Harry thought, was holding up his sleeve a great many cards. He would, in the new year, count the cards. For the moment he applied himself to the bacon. Outside the windows of the hall, the snow over the lake was beginning to show its first edge of gray under cloud, and the lake was beginning to stiffen in the deep middle, and in a town somewhere in the south of England, a man with gray eyes was sitting in a cheap cafe drinking very dark coffee and reading the Daily Prophet, and folding the corner of the page in half amusement, and waiting for the snow to go. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Sirius Black, Lord of the Dead. The snow went in its way. By the second week of February, the lake ice had thinned and broken into greenish slabs that drifted slowly toward the deep, and by the third week the willow had begun to show buds, and by the last week the buds had become a short, modest fringe of green. The owls came back over the Black Lake at dusk in numbers that meant the spring was thinking about asserting itself. Hermione, in those weeks, finished her second list, and her third, and her fourth. The fourth list was tidy enough that she had filed it in a leather folder with tabs. She had also developed a habit, when crossing the courtyard, of squinting at small details: a flagstone laid wrong way up, the angle at which Mrs. Norris was sitting, the precise pattern in which the candles in the front hall had guttered. She did this without awareness. The goddess of strategy had begun to live in her hands. Harry had stopped flinching when she pointed out things that an ordinary first year would not have noticed. Hermione had stopped expecting him to flinch. Cedric came down to Gryffindor breakfast on Tuesdays to consult with Potter about Quidditch. The Hufflepuff table watched the consultations with mild Hufflepuff fondness. The actual consultations rarely got to Quidditch. They were about Plummer's diagrams of curses, and a quiet recurring chess problem they had set themselves, which involved the precise arrangement of the wandering staircases. Cedric was, even in waking, a calmer man than most of his old form had been, and Harry had begun to enjoy his company in a way he had not enjoyed Apollo's company in any previous epoch. Daphne, in the middle of February, dreamed of bones again. She came up to the fourth-floor classroom on a Wednesday morning at 5, before any of the rest of the school were awake, and Harry was waiting for her with a thermos of tea. Hermione had not yet been called. She would be told over breakfast. The dream had been distinctive enough that Daphne had not waited for the council hour. "He is out," she said. "Out of Azkaban. Out of Azkaban. He left 2 nights ago. The Dementors did not perhaps notice for a day. I had the dream the moment he stepped on the soil of the mainland." "You are sure?" "I am sure." "How sure?" "I felt his foot leave the boat." She was sitting on the edge of the desk with her hands wrapped around her tea. The tea was steaming. The morning behind the windows was very dark. "He is southbound. I do not think he is coming straight here. He has business first. I think he is hunting someone." "Who?" "I do not know. Someone who put him in Azkaban. Someone he has wanted to kill for 10 years. He won't kill them. He may. He told me in the letter not to kill anyone for him. He has perhaps decided not to kill on his own account either. You are an optimistic husband now, friend. I have been Hades' brother for 60,000 years. I have learned to read the breath under his sentences. He is not, this time, going to kill." "All right," she took a sip. "He told you not to kill anyone for him. Is there a particular person he was thinking of?" "Yes, Pettigrew, the man who put him in. The one who told the upstart where Lily Potter and James Potter were. Sirius will know how to find him. He will not, under any circumstances, kill him in front of Hades. Pettigrew. There is, I think, a piece of a man named Peter Pettigrew somewhere in this castle. I have felt the small bruised flavor of him on the second floor. He is small now, very small, smaller than a man should be. He is hiding. He is hiding." "Good," she finished her tea. "I will tell Hermione." "I will not tell Cedric until tonight. He sings when he is excited." "Yes." She left. He sat for a moment in the empty classroom with the lamp burning low and considered. He had spent the last 3 months, since the Mirror of Eris, in a small interior reorganization. He had, in the days after Christmas, set down a number of small wantings he had previously been carrying. He had not, after Christmas, gone walking past the 7th-floor corridor again. He had, in the way of men who have given themselves a clear-eyed look and have not enjoyed it, become more practical and a little colder. He had not become unkind. He had become, in the small hours, more deliberate. The matter of Norbert was on the same morning as the news. Hagrid had, since November, been hatching a dragon egg in his hut. He had told Harry about the egg over a cup of tea in early January. Harry had told Hagrid that hatching dragon eggs in wooden huts in school grounds was on balance an unwise project. Hagrid had taken the advice in the spirit it was offered and had, against all advice, hatched the egg anyway. The dragon was now 3 weeks old. The dragon was the size of a large dachshund. The dragon was beginning to set things on fire. By Thursday afternoon, Hagrid was, in his way, weeping. He took a chunk out of T.H. table, he said, miserably, as Harry sat in the hut with a cup of tea and the dragon, Norbert, on his shoulder. He set the curtains on fire. I caught the curtains. It's not safe for him to live with a man, Harry. It's not safe for him to live with a man. I have known it since Tuesday. I just didn't want to know it on Tuesday. I know. My brother Charlie can take him. I sent an owl. He's working with dragons in Romania. Then send him. I can't get him out without being seen. Harry drank his tea. He thought about it. The thinking briefly was about logistics, a Norwegian ridgeback in a crate on the highest tower at midnight, to friends of Charlie's who would apparate from the tower roof to Romania. The tower in question was the astronomy tower. The night in question would be Saturday. The school in February at midnight had no business in any of the towers, and a long history of Ron's brothers Fred and George being there anyway. "Saturday at midnight," he said. "Fred and George will help, so will Hermione if I ask. So will I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, we're offering. He's a hatchling, Hagrid. He won't do well here." "He won't, will he?" Norbert, on Harry's shoulder, gave a small interested RRRK and turned his head very deliberately to consider Harry's face. The dragon was the size of a dachshund and had the bright orange eyes of a thing that had already decided about most of the universe. The eyes, when they had settled on Harry's, did the brief, unmistakable courtesy of a creature that recognized something older than itself. The dragon, very slightly, lowered its small horned head. The dragon, very slightly, did not bite Harry's ear, which was, Harry knew, because Hagrid had been bitten that morning, not the dragon's habit. He scratched it behind the horns. The dragon made a small content rumble. Hagrid blinked. "He doesn't usually take to strangers. Number, I suppose you've a way." "I suppose I do." Hagrid did not pursue it. Hagrid was, in the particular way of men who had been raised among large, dangerous animals, content with the fact that the boy on his sofa could scratch his dragon, and content not to ask why. Harry put the dragon in its crate. Hagrid wept quietly. Hagrid did not let Norbert see him weep, because Norbert was sensitive about it. The dragon ate a half-pound of raw mutton. Saturday at midnight on the astronomy tower was cold and clean and very dark. Fred and George were there with the crate slung between them, and Hermione, who had insisted on coming, was at the parapet with her wand, and Harry was at the eastern parapet with the cloak around his shoulders, listening for footsteps. Daphne was below in the corridor, by arrangement, in case Filch should come through. The cold air of the tower had the small clear flavor of a high place at the end of February. The wind moved in patterns. Harry let it. The friends of Charlie arrived on broomsticks. There were two of them, both in their 20s, both bone-tired in the manner of men who had apparated 3 times in succession before flying. They tied the crate to a harness between their 2 brooms. Norbert grizzled. They took off into the dark. The crate swung. The flight away from the tower was absurd and competent and beautiful. The friends were halfway across the lake before Filch's cat scented them. Harry felt the cat on the stairs 5 seconds before the door at the foot of the spiral. He gestured. Fred and George ducked behind the parapet on the south side. Hermione joined them. Harry pulled the cloak around himself. He stepped to the center of the tower in the dark and stood very still. Filch came up. Filch went to the parapet. Filch's face in the moonlight that suddenly did the small puckered thing his face did when he had not, in fact, found the thing he had hoped to find. Filch sniffed the air. Filch swore, as he often did, at no one in particular. Filch waited 5 minutes. Filch went back down. After Filch had gone, Fred Weasley sat down on the stone of the tower and exhaled. "Bloody clothes. Yes. Potter, that thing you did, where you stood in the middle. You weren't there, I mean. I could see you, I think the cloak you had it on, but there was a Filch came up and he didn't. There was something he was looking at that wasn't where you were." George, beside him, was already nodding. Hermione at the parapet was watching them both with great attention. "Some other time," Harry said, "when it isn't midnight on a tower with a dragon in midair." Right, fair, but at some point, soon, it's been getting weirder, Potter. I know, you knew, I have suspected. For a while, some time, yes." Fred closed his mouth. George looked at him, then at Harry. They were, between them, doing the small mutual conferring of 2 boys who had been inside each other's heads for 15 years and had no reason to stop now. Harry could feel the small private debate they were having across the air between them. He let it be. He had in older lives watched Hermes argue with himself in many configurations. "At some point," Fred said. "At some point," Harry said. All right. The friends of Charlie had crossed the lake. Norbert was on his way to Romania. Hermione, who had the small, sensible habit of stating obvious facts when there was nothing else to say, said, "It is 12:40. We should go down. Mind the second step from the top, it has frozen and is slippery." They went down. Harry parted from the twins on the 3rd floor and slipped under the cloak the rest of the way down to the corridor where Daphne was waiting. She was sitting on a stone step, reading. "Done," he said. "Filch came up, did not see us. You used the cloak. I used the cloak. Twins. They have begun to ask. I have begun to answer. Mind the timing." "I know." She turned the page. "Sirius. What?" "He is in Hogsmeade." He sat down on the step beside her. "How sure? I felt his weight on the bridge over the river an hour ago. He is north of us, within a mile. Now, he thought. "I will go," he said. "I will not let you go alone. I am the one he wants to see first. He will not be in the mood for a council. He will not be in the mood for an ambush either. Hera, I am coming." He looked at her. She had the small fixed jaw she had had at the council in Athens when she had refused to let him go to the river without her. He had not on that occasion won the argument, and the not winning had been useful. He had not on that night been killed by the river. He weighed the experiment of winning the argument now and decided not to. All right, she stood. They went down through the school by the long way, by passageways Daphne knew and Harry, by now mostly knew. They came out by the boathouse at 1:15 in the morning and crossed the lawn under the cloak, and went out the small servant's gate at the end of the kitchen garden, which had the kind of charm on it that made it forget for a few seconds at a time that it was a gate. They went up the path toward Hogsmeade. The path was empty. 2/3 of the way up the slope, by a stand of birches, a black dog stepped out of the trees. The dog was the size of a Newfoundland. The dog had gray eyes. The dog did not bark. The dog stopped 20 feet up the path and watched them coming. Harry took the cloak off. He folded it carefully over his arm. Daphne beside him did not draw her wand. She put her hands at her sides, in the formal, deliberate position of a queen meeting a king. The dog moved. The dog did the small ripple a body does when its inhabitant is changing shape, and a man stood where the dog had been. He was 32 and looked 42. He had black hair in dirty mats to his shoulders and a beard that had been a beard for 10 years and was learning how to be a beard again. He wore prison clothes that someone had given him a coat over. The coat did not fit. He had gray eyes that had, in spite of the 10 years of Dementor air, not lost their depth. The eyes had become, inside the depth, a great deal more careful than they had been when he had been 22 and famous and stupid. Brother, Hera, Hades. He took 3 steps down toward them. The motion was the motion of a man who had walked a long way that night and had walked a longer way the previous week and was, at the moment, conserving everything he had not yet had to spend. You are 11. I had hoped for 30. Next time, he looked at Daphne. The look was the look of an in-law who had not been on speaking terms with his sister-in-law for 1,200 years, and who had, in his 10 years of Dementor air, had a great deal of opportunity to revise his accounting of her. Hera, Hades, I owe you a dinner. You owe me, she said mildly, an apology for a wedding I was not invited to. Persephone's, do you mean? I do, it was rude. It was, in retrospect, very rude. I will accept the dinner in lieu. You will have it. A pause. He breathed out. The breath made a great cloud, more than her cloud and Harry's together. The air around Hades had always done that, even in this borrowed body, the small extra weight of the underworld in the lungs. He sat down, abruptly, on the grass at the edge of the path, like a man whose knees had decided for him. Harry sat down opposite him. Daphne did not sit. She remained standing, watching the road behind them, in the position she had always taken at the edges of councils. He watched her watching. He let her work. You came south fast, he said. 2 reasons. Pettigrew. Pettigrew is the first reason. He is in this castle. He is in the form of a rat. He has been for 10 years in the home of a Weasley. Ron's family rat. Yes, Scabbers, he is a person. He is the person who told Voldemort where Lily and James were. I had wondered. Daphne thought so. He will be killed for it. Not by you. A long silence. The gray eyes considered him. Hades was, in his old form and his new, a man who had killed in council and had not lied about it. He was not a man given to performances of restraint, because restraint was his ordinary breath. The face on him in the cold birchlight did not flinch. It considered, not by me, not by you, by the ministry then, through the proper channels. I will hand him over with a witness present. A witness who can make the witness stand. I had been working on the problem when you wrote me. I did not write you. You did. A small note in green ink in the cover of the 3rd volume of an unpublished commentary on Pliny. Hera's hand. I read it on Tuesday. Daphne, at the edge of the path, did not turn. Husband, now friend, I should have told you. You should have. I did not want to put it in the council document until I was sure he had received it. All right, we will discuss it. Continue, brother. Hades inclined his head. Pettigrew is the first reason. The second reason is the upstart. I know about the upstart. You know the upstart has a piece of himself in a head in this school. Yes. Did you also know, said Hades, that the upstart has 6 pieces of himself in 6 other places in this country, and that he has been moving all 6 pieces since November into a configuration he believes is auspicious? A pause. The cold of the birches briefly became sharper. He has been doing it gradually. He believes it is undetected. It is not undetected. It is detected by me. I have been watching from the prison cell. I had nothing else to do. A small dry edge to the voice. He is preparing to come back into a body. The body in the turban is not the body he wants. He intends to use the turban as a prelude. The full body, he has a plan. It involves the object on the 3rd floor. The stone, yes, you knew it was here. I knew it was somewhere when the flamels began to retire. I knew it was here when the dog appeared in Hagrid's possession. The dog was not by accident in Hagrid's possession. The dog was placed, by you, by me, with the small contrivance of a Greek pub and a kindly memory I gave to the publican. Yes. I gave the dog away in the form of a man with no money. Hagrid is a sound vessel. He is good with my breeds. I wish to know the location of the stone in advance of the upstart's wish for it. Considerate of you. Self-interested, I did not want the stone changing hands without a Greek being present. A small, nearly invisible smile. Old bureaucracy. He missed the bureaucracy. He had always missed the bureaucracy. Your plan. My plan was to come south, find Pettigrew, hand him to the ministry, get my name back, and meet you. The plan has changed twice this week. It has changed because the upstart has accelerated. He intends to come for the stone before the spring is finished. He intends to do it, I think, by the new moon, which is on the night of the 7th of June. That is 111 days. 111 days, yes. And you are going to, I am going to keep my plan. I am going to find Pettigrew by tomorrow. I will hand him to the ministry. I will get my name back. I will be at this school in person in late spring with my name back in a place where I can be useful. You will meet the upstart on the 7th of June at the foot of the 3rd floor obstacles. I will not be in that room with you. I will be near. I will be ready. You will not come down to the stone with me. Number, why? Because the upstart will, if he sees Hades coming, do something theatrical and destructive. He has always been afraid of me. Most of his small mortal lives have been spent being afraid of me. He will, if he sees me, not bother to keep the fight tidy. He will burn the school. He will try. All right. You will be enough. Athena will be enough. Apollo, if you involve him, will be enough. Hera at the door will be enough. I will be at the perimeter. If the upstart escapes the room, I am there for the perimeter. Acceptable. And brother, yes, do not in the room with him. Let your face know you. Wear the boy in front. Do the work. He is very small. He will, if you do not let him see Zeus, dissipate when you push him. If he sees you, he will fight in a way he would not otherwise have been brave enough for. All right. Persephone, by the way. Yes, she is awake. She has been awake longer than I have. She has been quietly doing. I do not yet know what she has been doing. She will tell me next week. In Greece. In Croatia currently. Bring her up to date. Send her our regards. I will. Along quiet. The wind in the birches did the small thing the wind in birches does. Hades, on the cold ground, leaned back against the trunk of one of them and let his head touch the bark and closed his eyes for a moment. He had not, Harry thought, slept inside a body that did not have dementors patrolling outside the door for 10 years. He was tired. He was very tired. Sirius Black. Yes, he is in there with you. He is. He has been in there with me from the beginning. Will he be all right? He will be all right. He is a young man by his own counting. He had been a strange young man. He had been in love with his friend's wife, mildly and with no plan to act on it, and he had been a good godfather to your other body, and he was loyal in a way most 20-year-olds are not, and he was funny, and he had black moods. He fits. We have been negotiating. He has been generous. He understood the situation by the 3rd year in the cell. He did not pretend to have known me before. He did not push back. He has been patient. He will, in this life, walk in his body when I am not using it, and he will walk well, and I will not interfere. I have arranged with him that he will not be married for 6 years. Beyond that, I have given him his freedom. Considerate. He is loved by your other body. I owe him my courtesy. I am glad you have it. So am I. Daphne at the path said very quietly, someone is coming up from the village. Hades opened his eyes. He stood. The motion was the motion of a man who had been a king for a great while, and the body, even tired, did the work. Hagrid, he said. He has been waiting for me at the boundary stone since 1 o'clock. I am late. He is, with great patience, beginning to worry. He knows you. He does now. I told him briefly on the path before I came up. I gave him only the small piece. He took it well. He has gone back to wait. Now, brother, listen. Yes, I will see you at the perimeter on the 7th of June. I will see you before that, perhaps once, perhaps twice, depending on how it goes with Pettigrew. I will not until late spring be safe to know in public. I am currently the most wanted man in Britain. The Daily Prophet thinks I am a murderer. They will not stop thinking it for some weeks yet. We will play the role until the role is no longer useful. All right, Hera. Yes, you have in the last 20 minutes refrained from criticizing me. I notice. I am grateful. You have in the last 10 years been in Dementor air. I am not a monster. You have, said Hades with the small dry smile of a man whose vocabulary of love had always been formal, been my favorite stepmother. Hades, Hera, he nodded to them both. He stepped sideways into the grass. The grass briefly swallowed his outline. The dog reappeared. The dog gave them a long look. The dog turned and went, padding silently back toward the village. Within 30 seconds the birches had taken him. Harry stood. He folded the cloak. He did not, while folding it, say anything. Daphne came up beside him and put her gloved hand, again, briefly, over his gloved hand, and again removed it. Wife, husband, he is the same. He is. He is more careful. He has had 10 years. He has had 10 years. He has gotten old in there. He was always old. He has gotten older. Yes, a pause. The cold air around them was very still. The willows on the slope had in the moonlight the shapes they had had for 900 years and had had on this morning. The path was empty. The castle behind them was a dark shoulder against the sky. We need to get back. Yes, they went back. They came in by the kitchens. They parted at the foot of the dungeon stairs. He went up. He went to bed. He did not dream. He had since November mostly stopped dreaming. The dreams had been replaced at this point by short, dense practical thinking that did the work of dreams in the 7 hours of his sleep without troubling him. In the morning at breakfast, he sat next to Ron, who was feeding bits of egg to Scabbers under the table. He watched Scabbers eat the egg. He watched the rat's small, clever face. He filed the rat. He did not yet do anything about it. He waited. Hades in the village was working. Hades did not, in any iteration, like to be interrupted while he was working. Harry would find out in the next 48 hours what Hades had done with Pettigrew, and he would, in the next 48 hours, attend to whatever pieces of the rat were left. He drank his pumpkin juice. Ron, beside him, complained about Snape. Hermione, across the table, looked at Harry and looked at the rat and looked at Harry. He gave her with his eyes a brief, calm message. Yes, soon. She nodded. She returned to her toast. 3 days later, the Daily Prophet published a story on page 3. A man named Peter Pettigrew, presumed dead these 10 years, had been arrested in a public house in the village of Hogsmeade in possession of a wand, and had been taken into ministry custody. Sirius Black, on the same evening, had turned himself in to the Ministry of Magic in Diagon Alley, with a witness, with a pensive memory, and with the patience of a man who had been waiting 10 years for this particular bureaucratic inconvenience to take its course. Within a week the verdict was overturned. Sirius Black was, by mid-March, a free man. The Daily Prophet, by mid-March, was running stories about how it had always known the truth. The Ministry of Magic, by mid-March, was not running stories at all. In the third week of March, on a Tuesday afternoon, a tall, thin man with gray eyes and a beard he had begun, with some patience to comb, presented himself at the gates of Hogwarts with a cordial letter from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and the small private agenda of meeting his godson. Hagrid let him in. Hagrid did not, when he let him in, raise an eyebrow at the small additional weight that came in with him. Hades had come south. The interview took place in McGonagall's office, with McGonagall present as the ranking adult, and with Dumbledore present as a courtesy because Dumbledore had, on Sirius's letter of arrival, decided that he would also be in the room when Sirius met the boy. Harry had been pulled out of defense by an apologetic note from McGonagall. Sirius had been sitting in McGonagall's high-backed chair, looking thinner than he had looked under the birches and 3 shades cleaner. He stood when Harry came in. He shook Harry's hand. He held Harry's hand for 1 second longer than the introduction warranted and let it go. Mr. Potter, Mr. Black. You will know by now the rough shape of the news. I read the Prophet. I have been, said Sirius, wronged for 10 years. I will not bore you with the details. The relevant part for our present conversation is that I am the godfather your parents named for you, and that if your aunt and uncle do not object, I should very much like to take some part in your raising over the coming summers. McGonagall, beside the window, made a small approving sound. I will, Harry said, have to ask my aunt and uncle. They are, in their way, my legal guardians until the next courtroom decides otherwise. I would, in my heart, prefer to be at Sirius Black's house this summer. Then we will, said Dumbledore mildly from behind the desk, begin the procedural work toward that end. Petunia Dursley is, by my information, a woman who can be persuaded by the right combination of tea and an envelope. We shall send tea in an envelope. I would be grateful, sir. You are welcome. He left McGonagall's office at 3:30 with a list of letters to write and a small loose feeling in the chest that, for 2 or 3 minutes, surprised him. He walked it off down the corridor toward Gryffindor Tower. He did not, in any of the corridors, see Quirrell. Quirrell, he reflected, had been making himself scarce since February. The 111 days had begun. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The Stone, the Mirror, the Worm. The 7th of June was a clear night. The new moon was new in earnest. The sky over the lake was so dark that the constellations behind it stood up like brass nails on a board. Harry sat on the bed in his dorm, in his school robes, and laced his shoes for the 3rd time. Ron, on the bed across from him, was wearing his own school robes, and Hermione, who had come up by way of the staircase that ought to have shrieked when a girl walked it but had been told to be quiet by Hermione, was sitting on the trunk at the foot of the bed with her wand on her knee. "You don't have to come," Harry said. "We have had this conversation," said Hermione. "I know, we are not having it again." "All right." Ron, who had been quieter for the last fortnight than Ron usually was, said, "I'm coming." "All right, don't say all right like that. I'm coming." "All right, Ron." The plan was Hermione's, with consultations from Daphne and Cedric and small specific corrections from a man with gray eyes who had at 9:30 sent a patronus from somewhere in the lower forests with a single word, ready. Hades was at the perimeter. Cedric was on the 4th floor, in a corridor that the Hufflepuff prefects had no business being in at any hour, with a small bag of his own and an instrument that looked like a tuning fork and was not. Daphne was at the 3rd floor door, with Hagrid's permission and a hairpin and a small private agreement she had, that very morning, established with a 3-headed dog. The dog had taken 3 days of biscuits to come around. Once it had come around with the depth Hades breeds always came around with. Hermione, Ron, and Harry would go through the obstacles. They would meet the upstart at the mirror. They would do what was necessary. The plan, like all good plans, had been written in such a way that the people executing it could discover the necessary at the moment. At 9:45, the fat lady was asleep. They went past her in the cloak. The corridors were empty. The portraits muttered in their dreams. The torches in the corridor outside the 3rd floor door had been turned to a low blue burn. Daphne was at the door. She was leaning in her green and silver robes against the stone wall opposite the door, and she had her arms folded. "He's gone in," she said, 8 minutes ago. Quirrell. "Yes, he came up from the dungeons at 9:30. He was singing under his breath. He had his wand. He went past the dog without knowing the dog was Hades' breed. The dog let him pass because Hades had told the dog to let him pass. He has gone down through the devil's snare. He has, by my count, gone past the keys." Snape was in the entrance hall at 9:15, watching the Slytherin curfew. He saw Quirrell go up. He is, by my latest information, currently in a heated discussion with Filch outside the headmaster's office. Dumbledore. Dumbledore left for London at 6 this evening. The ministry sent him an urgent owl. Sirius has, since 5, been at the ministry to keep him there. Hades' work. Hades' work. He nodded. He took a breath. He pulled the cloak off, folded it into his robe pocket. He looked for a half-second at the door behind which the Cerberus was sleeping, and then at the woman standing opposite the door, who was, in the low blue light, 10 centuries older than the schoolgirl she resembled. "Wife, husband, I will not be long. You will be as long as you need to be. Yes, don't kill him. I know, don't let him see you. I know. And Zeus. Yes, if he sees you anyway, do what you have to do. We will sweep up after." He nodded. He opened the door. The dog on the other side was sitting up, but the 3-head's eyes had the soft, preoccupied glow of a creature that was on permission. It looked at them, it made a low rumble. Daphne, behind them, made a small 2-finger hand signal at it. The dog inclined the center head 1/4 inch. He lay back down. Beneath him, a trapdoor in the floor stood ajar. Harry, Ron, and Hermione went down. Devil's Snare in the chamber below had been thoroughly demolished by Quirrell on the way down. The vines hung in limp, scorched ropes from the ceiling. They walked through it. They came to the room of keys. The key Quirrell had used had been left, ungentlemanly, on the floor by the door. Hermione picked it up and pocketed it. The chess room had a different problem. Quirrell had not played the chess. He had simply blasted his way through the center of the board with a curse that had, with admirable efficiency, removed 3 black knights and the white queen and left a smoking line of broken stone from the entrance to the exit. "He's in a hurry," Ron said. "He has been in a hurry," Harry said, "for 10 years. The next chamber was the troll. The troll was already unconscious. Quirrell had, with the brisk economy of his other self, stunned it on entry. They stepped over its left foot and went on. The next chamber, Snape's, was a small room with 7 bottles and a riddle. Quirrell had, on his way through, drunk one of the bottles and left the rest in a small, careful row. Hermione read the riddle in 5 seconds. She drank from the 3rd bottle from the left. The 3rd bottle was the bottle that took you forward. The bottle was small. It tasted of ice. Harry took a swallow. Ron took a swallow. They went on. The chamber at the end of the corridor was warm. The mirror was at the center of it, tall, gold. The same mirror he had seen in the 7th floor room at Christmas. The same engraving at the top. Quirrell was in front of it. He had taken his turban off and laid it over the back of a chair. The room was lit by his wand tip and by a single oil lamp on a low table. Quirrell was thin in the lamplight, thinner than Harry had remembered. His face was the face of a man who had not slept in 3 days. His hands were trembling, but his eyes were steady, and the eyes were the eyes of two people, one of them at the front of the head and the other of them not. Voldemort on the back of his head was visible because the back of his head was bald, and because the second face, which had no nose and had the color of the inside of an oyster, was already turned partially over Quirrell's left shoulder, watching the door. The door, when Harry came through it, was being watched. "Potter," said Quirrell, "Professor, you've come down. I had thought you might. The headmaster told me last week that I should keep an eye on you. He is not currently in the country, so I have made my arrangements." "You have." "The mirror," said Quirrell, "shows me getting the stone. It does not show me where the stone is. The stone is in the mirror, or behind it, or on it. The stone, my master tells me, is, if I look in the mirror with the proper desire to be given to the desirer. I have looked. I have desired, I have not received. That is unfortunate. It is. My master suggests that you may be, in this regard, more useful than I have been. He suggests that you, as the boy who survived him at 15 months, would have a particularly lucid view of his own reflection. He suggests that, accordingly, you might look into the mirror with the proper desire and produce the stone and hand it to me in exchange for your life and the lives of your two little friends behind you in the doorway." "My friends behind me," Harry said, "are not at risk." "That is for me too. They are not at risk." He had not changed his voice exactly. He had let one hairline crack of weight come into the syllable risk. The stone walls of the chamber, which had been painted in the lamplight in a low orange, did not change color, but the orange did briefly have a different quality, and the candles at the corners stretched by half a finger toward the ceiling. Quirrell, who had been smiling, did not entirely stop smiling, but the smile lost the small organizing principle that had been keeping it on the face. Voldemort, on the back of the head, said in a voice that was not Quirrell's, "Who are you?" Harry did not answer. He did not yet want to. "Look in the mirror, Potter." "I will." He stepped forward. He passed Quirrell. He stopped in front of the mirror. He did not this time let himself look at the surface for very long. He had a small, precise plan. He had thought about the plan for 111 days. The plan involved seeing his own face in the surface, holding the desire he had decided to use, and letting the mirror cooperate. The desire he had decided to use was, "I would like the stone in my pocket where Quirrell cannot reach it, so that I do not have to give it to him." He thought it. He thought it without the small private ornament of the wantings he had, in December, set down on the floor of his ribs. He thought it cleanly. He thought it as a man at a council thinks the small specific motion he is about to put forward. The mirror, considering him, considered the desire. The mirror found the desire to be of the kind that did not contradict its rules. The mirror dropped into the inside pocket of his school robes the small heavy red weight of the Philosopher's Stone. He did not externally change. His pocket weighed slightly more. "Well, Potter, nothing. What did you see?" "I saw," he paused and made his face do the small wistful thing of a child seeing his own grandparents. "I saw my parents. I saw them at the table at Christmas. He let his voice catch in a way that was, on this body, easy because the body had wanted that for 10 weeks. "I'm sorry, Professor, the mirror does not show me what you wanted." "He lies," said Voldemort instantly. "Let me speak to him, face to face." Quirrell hesitated. "Do it." He did it. He turned around slowly so that his face was, for a moment, away from Harry, and his back, with the second face on it, was toward Harry. The face of Voldemort in the lamplight was the face of a thing that had survived itself by 10 years and had not, in any of the 10 years, been at peace. It was very white. It was very thin. The eyes were the eyes of a man who had killed, in his time, a great many things, including a great many small and harmless things. The mouth, when it opened, was the mouth of an upstart who had built himself a large reputation in a small island over a generation, and who had in his entire career never met anyone who could in fact, given the necessary half-second of attention, end him. "I see you," said Voldemort. "Boy, I see you." Harry, by the mirror, did the small interior arithmetic he had practiced for 111 days. The arithmetic said, "The upstart is small enough that I can disperse him with a thought." The arithmetic said, "He has 6 other pieces of himself in this country." The arithmetic said, "If I disperse this piece without thought, the others will continue." The arithmetic said, "I should not in any case kill him today, because killing him today with my hand in this room, in this body, with these 2 children behind me as witnesses, would write a fact about me into the history of this island that I have not yet decided I want written." The arithmetic said, "Maim, disperse, walk out. Pursue the other pieces in the autumn." The arithmetic said, "If he sees Zeus, he will fight in a way he is not now brave enough to fight, and the fight will burn the school." Hades had been right. Do not let him see Zeus. He let his face stay an 11-year-old's face. He let his hand stay an 11-year-old's hand. He raised the wand. "I'm sorry, Professor," he said. "He's lying to you. He is." Quirrell turned again, the body's instinct overriding the second face's order, and that turning was the small mistake Harry needed. He did not move his hand. He did not, in any visible way, channel the wand. He let, for the first time in this body, the small private hairline of the king he had been all along open in him. A single hairline, a single second of permission, and he aimed the second at the back of Quirrell's head, where the parasite was writing, and at the parasite alone. He spoke very softly in archaic Greek, the words the last of his old loves had used on a hillside in the 2nd century before the 1st century, when she had wanted a thing dispersed without being killed. Sigma Cap Epsilon Delta Alpha Sigma Omicron Nu Tau Omicron letter 1 Fe6 Tau Omicron Nu. Disperse this one. The room did not catch fire. The mirror did not crack. The candles did not, in any visible way, flicker. The lamp on the table, however, went out. The wand tip in Quirrell's hand went out. The room dropped into the precise blue dark of a cellar below a closed sky. In the dark, Voldemort screamed. The scream was the scream of a parasite that had, for 10 years, settled into the cells of its host, and had, for the last fortnight, been quietly extending small fiber threads of itself into the host's gut, and which now found that the threads were, very quickly, being detached. The scream had no body to come out of. It came out of Quirrell's mouth as if Quirrell were an instrument someone else was playing. It went on for less than 5 seconds. By the end of the 5 seconds, the parasite had been disassembled into a shape that could not, in any meaningful sense, be said to be Voldemort. It was, by then, an ash. The ash drifted briefly under the ceiling of the chamber and went out the door and away. Quirrell the body dropped to his knees. He coughed. He pressed his palms to his temples. He looked for a long beat as confused as a man who had been driving a car for 10 miles and did not anymore know where the car was. Harry walked over to him. He knelt. He put his hand very briefly on Quirrell's shoulder. "Professor," he said, "Potter, you will be all right. There was a parasite. It is gone. You will need a great deal of rest. The headmaster will be back tomorrow. I am going to take you up to Madame Pomfrey now. Don't try to talk. Come on, up." He got Quirrell to his feet. Quirrell was so light that the lifting did not require, in this body, anything Harry had not had since he was 8. He was not, in any case, the only person in the room. Hermione had come up. Hermione was at his other elbow. Ron had not come further into the room than the doorway and had been all this time at his post. Ron was Ron, but Ron was also now the door, and Harry intended that Ron should always be allowed to be the door. They had a job for him. He was good at it. "Take him up," he said to Hermione. Slowly, the Keys room had a healer's bench. "I will." "Ron, yeah, go with her." "Right." They went. Their footsteps faded up the corridor. He stood for a moment in the chamber alone with the mirror. The mirror was, he saw, watching him. He watched it back. He did not this time let the surface speak. He turned around. He walked out. In the doorway on the way through, he passed, just briefly, the small invisible weight he had recognized in the corridor an hour before. It was a shape that had been at the perimeter, that had not gone over the perimeter, and that had, in the last 5 minutes, allowed itself the courtesy of stepping inside the 3rd-floor door to make sure that nothing had gone wrong. Hades did not show himself. Hades stood just at the edge of the doorway in the dark, and he did not say anything. He merely inclined his head a quarter of an inch as Harry passed. Harry inclined his back. The weight withdrew. He went up. In the 3rd-floor corridor, Daphne was where he had left her. Done. He did not see you. He did not see me. He saw the wand and the boy. He saw what he expected to see. Quirrell, alive, will recover. Hermione and Ron are taking him to Pomfrey. And the stone. He took the small, heavy red weight out of his pocket. He held it briefly in his palm. He put it back. "I will give it to Dumbledore in the morning. He will return it to the Flamels if he is wise. I will recommend in my note that the Flamels destroy it. He will be wise, probably." A pause. He looked at her. She looked at him. The corridor was very quiet. The dog in the room behind them was already asleep again. The torches in their brackets did the small, slow burn they had been doing for 800 years. She put her arms around him. She had not, in any of the 8 months they had been at Hogwarts, done this. She had not, in this body, ever done this. She did not in any of the previous epics do it casually, and she did not do it now casually. She did it for 1 second as the small, brief, practical hug of a colleague who had been at the perimeter in the dark for half an hour while her oldest friend went down a corridor he had not been certain he would come up out of cleanly. He let her. He returned it very briefly. He stepped back. Wife, husband, bed, yes, tomorrow, he went up. He did not, on the way up, see anyone. The school was asleep. In the morning he was in the hospital wing, because Madame Pomfrey had heard about the events of the previous evening through Hermione and had pulled him in for what she called observation. He had not, on the previous evening, been injured. He had, in particular, not been touched by either Quirrell or the parasite. He had, however, in the small last 5 seconds of the doing, allowed himself one hairline of the king he had been, and the body, an 11-year-old's body, had done the work of channeling the hairline, and the body was not, this morning, entirely comfortable. He had a fever. He had a small headache. He had in his left hand an interesting tremor he had not seen since he had last been on horseback in 327 BC. He sat on the bed in pajamas and let Madame Pomfrey mother him, because Madame Pomfrey was good at it and the body needed it. Daphne came in at 10. She had a tin of biscuits. Tracy's mother sent them again. Bless Tracy's mother. How do you feel? Old, dramatic, quite genuine, I think. She sat in the chair by the bed. She did not put her hand on his hand. She had, the night before, used up her quota of touches. She did not, in the daylight, intend to spend another. Madame Pomfrey, in the next room, was singing under her breath, Dumbledore. The stone came in at 9, took it, smiled at me, asked me 3 questions. I answered 2 of them. He thanked me for my honesty. The third, he asked who last night did the work. You said. I said the wand and the boy. He believed you. He did not. He nodded. He left. He will in time ask the question more directly. We will in time give him the more direct answer. When the autumn term begins, not before. Let him work for it. He likes working. Cedric, on the 4th floor corridor last night, he sang under his breath. Filch heard him. Filch chased him for 10 minutes through 3 corridors and could not catch him because the song kept routing around Filch's hearing. Cedric had a wonderful time. He is at lunch. Apollo at lunch, yes, the other pieces. 6 of them scattered. Hades knows the locations. He will this summer work on them. He will not in any of the cases do it alone. We will help. All right, this summer. Yes, where? You will be at Sirius Black's. I will be in Wiltshire. We will arrange visits. Visits in the way of friends. In the way of friends. A small quiet. Madame Pomfrey in the next room finished her singing and started on a different one. The window over the lake was open. Spring smells were coming in. Harry, yes, I am proud of you. He looked at her. You were proud of me before in older lives exactly twice. I am being more careful with the word this time. I have noticed. You did the work. You held back. You did not kill. You did not let the school burn. You did not let him see you. Hera, yes, thank you. She reached briefly with one hand and touched the back of his hand. The touch was a colleague's. The touch said nothing. The touch said everything that did not need to be said. She removed her hand. She stood. She inclined her head. She went out. The door behind her did not slam. It closed, in the deliberate way her doors had always closed. Madame Pomfrey came in. She fussed at him. She gave him a dose of something that tasted of melted licorice. She told him to lie back. He lay back. He looked at the ceiling. The ceiling in the morning sun was a clean cream color with a single beam of dust suspended through it. He closed his eyes. He did not again dream. Dumbledore came in the afternoon. The light through the windows had moved across the floor by the time the door at the end of the ward opened, and the headmaster stood in it, with a small box of sherbet lemons in his hand and his hat under his arm. Madame Pomfrey behind him made the exasperated noise she made when men brought sweets onto her ward. Dumbledore made a small placating gesture at her. She let him pass. She closed the door behind him. He sat in the chair Daphne had vacated. Mr. Potter, sir, you have had a strenuous evening. It has been managed, sir. It has been, he said, very thoroughly managed. I have been all morning at the 3rd floor corridor. The dog was asleep. The devil's snare was scorched in a way I would expect a man of moderate skill to scorch it. The keys were in the lock. The chess board was broken. The troll was unconscious. The 7 bottles had been arranged in a row that suggested a person of considerable patience had done the riddle correctly. The mirror was undisturbed. The stone was not in the mirror. No, sir. You have it. I have it. I will give it to you. He took it out of his pocket. He set it on the white cloth of the bedside table. The stone on the cloth was a small heavy red weight. Dumbledore looked at it. Dumbledore did not, at first, pick it up. The Flamels, he said, will be sad to lose it. They have lived long lives, sir. They have done the work they wished to do. They will be willing, I think, to set it down. How do you know what the Flamels are willing for, Mr. Potter? I am guessing, sir. Yes, a small, dry smile. You are, I will write to them. They will, I expect, be willing. He picked the stone up. He turned it in his fingers. He set it down. Mr. Potter, sir, Quirrell told me when I sat with him this morning that there had been a great deal of light in the room when the parasite was disposed of. He said he could not remember who had done the disposing. He said the room had gone dark. He said when the room had come back that the parasite was gone and that he was, I quote him, kneeling on the floor and being addressed by Mr. Potter with great kindness. Yes, sir, it was a parasite. Yes, sir, Voldemort. A piece of him in the back of Quirrell's head. He had, I think, been there a year. He came in through Albania. You are very certain about this. I am giving the best account I have, sir. You are. A long pause. He folded his hands. Mr. Potter, you know that I am asking in this conversation a question. I am asking it gently. I will continue to ask it gently. You may in this conversation decline to answer. Sir, what are you? I am Harry Potter, sir. Yes. I am, however, somewhat older than I appear. How much older? That is the part I am asking, sir, to defer. He nodded. He did not press. He took, briefly, a sherbet lemon out of the small box and unwrapped it with the consideration of a man whose attention had, for the moment, been recruited to a small project. You will in time tell me. Yes, sir. I will in time ask in a way that is more difficult for you to defer. I will be in time easier to ask. That is fair. Thank you, Mr. Potter. Sir, do you mean in this school harm? No, sir, I mean it well. And the upstart, as you call him. 6 remaining pieces. We will work on the locations through the summer. I would welcome your assistance, sir, when you are ready to give it on terms that do not require me to give you today the answer to the question I am deferring. You are bargaining. I am asking, sir. I would prefer to bargain when I am taller. A small, surprised laugh. The laugh was 3 breaths long. He marked it the way he marked his own. He filed Dumbledore's laughter next to Hermione's. Mr. Potter, said Dumbledore, I will do this with you. I will help you with the 6 pieces. I will not press the question of who you are until you are ready. I will in exchange ask that you not, in any of your private operations, endanger this castle or its students more than the operation absolutely requires. That is the standard I will hold myself to. It is, sir. Yes, tea. What? Madame Pomfrey lets me have tea after lunch. I would like to have it now. Will you have a cup? He smiled. He took the cup Madame Pomfrey, summoned by the mention of her name, brought in, and he sat in the chair and they drank tea together. And he told Harry an old story about a phoenix and a thief that he had. He said, never told anyone but had been carrying around for 50 years, and Harry laughed twice. He left after the tea at 4 o'clock. The stone he took with him in the box of sherbet lemons. After he had gone, Harry lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling was the same ceiling. The week was nearly over. In the evening Ron came up. He had brought the chess set. They played 3 games, and Ron won the first 2 and let Harry win the third. Ron did not bring up the matter of the previous night. Ron was, Harry thought, going to bring it up at some point, in the manner of a man who needed to ask whether his friend had become a stranger. Harry was prepared, when the question came, to be honest in the part of the answer he could be honest about, and gentle in the part he could not. Ron, in the meantime, was a steady presence at his bedside and an excellent chess player. Hermione came up after dinner with a small parcel of chocolate frogs and a stack of 3 different newspapers. She had been clipping articles. She sat in the chair, organized the articles into 3 piles, and read out the relevant headlines, which were, in order, AURORS confirm peace of mind in Scotland, troll attacks down, and an item on page 7 about a strange clear weather pattern over Hogsmeade that the local farmers had been remarking on. She was, by the 3rd headline, nearly smiling. He had not seen her nearly smile in print before. Athena. Yes, you are pleased. I am pleased. She set the papers down. We did the work without burning the school. We did it without revealing ourselves. We have a year, we have a list, we have one another. We do. Sleep, husband now friend. Yes, stepmother. She made the noise again. She left. He slept. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Slow Thunder. The end-of-year feast was on the Friday before they went home. The great hall had been hung in green and silver, because Slytherin had won the house cup, and the Slytherin table, when Harry came in, was already half cheerful. Harry sat down between Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table and applauded, with the small, impeccable courtesy of a man who had spent 2,000 years in courts. When Snape received the cup from Dumbledore, Ron applauded with the brittle politeness of a boy whose house had finished second. Across the hall, at the Slytherin end, Daphne Greengrass cut a piece of meat into small, precise squares. She caught his eye briefly and inclined her head 1/4 degree. He inclined his head 1/4 degree back. Dumbledore, at the high table, gave the kind of speech he always gave. Ramble at the start, 3 good lines in the middle, an ending that was simpler than it looked. He had cleaned up the 7th of June from the public account. He had said in his speech that there had been an incident at the school which had been thoroughly resolved by competent staff and by, he said, a small number of unusually competent students who acted with tremendous discretion. He had not named the students. He had let the eyes of the high table do the work of the naming. McGonagall had looked briefly at Hermione. Flitwick had looked briefly at Cedric. Sprout had looked briefly at Harry. Snape had looked, briefly and grudgingly, in a way that pretended he had not looked at Daphne. The award of points had not been changed. Slytherin had earned the most points fairly over the course of the year, and had earned them with the same quiet competence the council had been earning its points with all spring. Dumbledore had not, on this occasion, performed his trick of giving Gryffindor a last-minute boost. He had given Gryffindor, on the evening of the 8th of June, a small private boost in his office, which had been. He had told Harry that he intended to make the trip to Privet Drive himself, in July, with the small envelope and the small piece of advice for Petunia Dursley, and he had told him that, by the time the envelope was finished its work, Sirius Black would be Harry's legal summer guardian. Harry had nodded, Harry had thanked him. The feast ended, the students filed out, the school began to pack itself. On the Saturday morning, before any of them caught the train, the council met one last time. The meeting was on the cliffs above Hogsmeade, half a mile from the village proper, where the path from the school edged along a high stone shoulder over the lake's eastern shore. The cliffs in early June had in their seams foxgloves and small white flowers Harry did not know the name of, and a wind that had not made up its mind about whether to be summer. Sirius came up first, at the meeting time, in his own face. The face was filling out. He had had 2 months of ordinary food and ordinary sleep, and he was beginning to look like a man who would, at some point in this decade, have a life. He sat on a flat stone at the edge of the cliff and crossed his legs at the ankle and lit a small companionable cigarette, which Hermione, when she arrived, took out of his fingers and flicked with crisp efficiency into the lake. He grinned. He did not make a fuss. Hades had evidently briefed Sirius about Hermione. Cedric came up next, with his Hufflepuff scarf around his neck because the wind, and a small bundle in his hand, which turned out to be 6 small honey biscuits Tracy's mother had baked. He distributed them. The council ate. Daphne came up. Hermione, who had taken up a position on the second flat stone, made a small space for her. Daphne sat. She accepted a biscuit. She accepted with greater care the small private acknowledgement Hermione gave her, which had grown over the year into a colleague's nod. Harry came up last. He was the last because he had taken the long way, past the boathouse, in order to allow the others to be there before him, old habit. He sat on the third flat stone and folded his hands in his lap. "Council of 6, he said. "Council of 6, said Hermione. "With Hermes," said Sirius, by proxy. "Fred has told me this morning that he believes, he has not put it in those words, but he believes that between him and his brother there is a third person sometimes. He intends to live with the third person quietly until the third person introduces himself in a more orderly manner. He is wise. He is Persephone, in Croatia. She has been this year, organizing a network of women in the Balkans who have been unhappy with the Ministry of Magic in Sofia. She is formidable. She has not yet come to England. She will by Christmas. Demeter, asleep, we have suspicions. There is a woman in Cornwall who runs a herb farm and who has, over the last decade, brought back 2 species of plants previously thought extinct. We are watching her." Ares, a pause, they all looked at one another. "There is a man," said Cedric after a moment, "in the Ministry's Auror office named Rufus Scrimgeour. He has over the last 20 years been involved in 3 small wars and 2 larger interventions. His character is known to me. He is brave, competent, and quick to anger. He is as old as I am in his face. He is younger than I am. His war record reads like a record I read once." "Watch him," said Harry. "I am watching. Aphrodite, asleep certainly. We do not know. Artemis, likely the woman who runs the magical creatures sanctuary in Snowdonia. She has been, by report, working with hippogriffs since before she was 13. She is 28 now. Dionysus," a small dry laugh from Daphne, "asleep, almost certainly working in a pub somewhere. Hephaestus, there is a man in Diagon Alley," said Hermione, "named Algernon Brock who repairs wands. I have looked at 3 of his repaired wands. They are better than the original. He does not know it. We will visit him over the summer. Poseidon," a longer pause. The wind on the cliffs did the long curve over their backs that the wind on these cliffs had been doing for 900 years. "Asleep," said Sirius. "I have in the last 2 months of liberty been in Cornwall. I have walked along 3 of the headlands. I have not on any of them felt my brother. He may be far north. He may be on the continent. He may be in a body that is not yet in any usable sense his own. He will," said Harry, "wake when he wakes." "Yes, Hermes." "Half awake," said Daphne, "sharing a body, will be by Christmas a council member. Athena, awake. Apollo, awake. Hera, awake. Hades, awake. Zeus, awake." He looked at them. He looked at them for a long beat. The 5 other faces on the cliffs in the early June light were the faces of an Olympus that had been reborn into mortal robes. They were small. They were 11 and 12 and 16 and 32. They were in their bones what they were. He had seen in 2,000 years of half-lives the faces of a great many people he had cared about. He had not, in any of those lives, expected to see these faces again. He let himself, for 1 second, take them in. 5 awake, he said, 1 half awake, 6 asleep, possibly 7. 7, said Cedric, including Hermes, Fair, and the upstart, 6 pieces remaining, locations, Hades has a list. We'll share when secure, said Sirius. I will send it to you both, by separate routes, by the 2nd week of July. We will, by August, have a plan for the first 3 pieces. Death Eaters. Lucius Malfoy is in Wiltshire and will be, by June 20th, very politely visited at his home by a small woman in ministry robes who will ask him very specific questions. He will answer. Hera has been working on the visit. Hera, said Daphne mildly. My stepmother, said Sirius, is a marvelous administrator. Hush, a small laughter. The wind moved the foxgloves. The lake below the cliff did its slow morning work. Last business, said Hermione. Yes. We will in this council agree on a name. For ourselves. Yes, Olympus is sentimental. Pantheon is premature. We are in this iteration 6. We will be by the end of next year 8. We need a working name. What do you propose? The council. A long silence. Workmanlike. That is the point. Acceptable to me, said Cedric. I have in older lives been overly fond of names. The council then, the council. The 5 of them, sitting on the cliffs, did the small ceremonial nod that was the closest they came to a vote. The council was in this small-bodied iteration, formally constituted at 11:20 on a Saturday morning in June, on a cliff over a lake, in the company of foxgloves with biscuits and one badly flicked cigarette in the lake below. Hades stood. He brushed grass off his trousers. He looked at the lake. He looked at Harry. Brother, it is good, he said, to have you back. It is good to be back. I will see you, he said, at Privet Drive in 3 weeks. Petunia will hate me. The hatred will be a small price. Don't make her hate you more than necessary. I am, by tradition, not the brother who knows the difference. Harry smiled. He stood. He turned. The council, one by one, came down off the cliffs and walked back to the village in a loose procession that did not, to a passerby, have the look of a procession at all. 2 children, a teenager, a young woman, a tall, thin man with gray eyes. They did not appear to be talking. They were in fact talking. They were talking in the way old colleagues talk when the silence is the same as the conversation. The train left Hogsmeade Station at 4. The platform was crowded. Harry sat in a compartment with Ron, Hermione, Fred, George, and halfway to King's Cross, Cedric. They played Exploding Snap. They ate the last of Tracy's mother's biscuits. The English countryside went past the window in the long, loose, summer yellow drift it had been making for a week. He looked at it. He had not, in older lives, paid the English countryside the attention it deserved. The train pulled into King's Cross. The platform was full of parents. Petunia Dursley was at the wall by platform 9, with her arms crossed, in a dress he had not seen before. She looked older than she had on the day she had put him on the train 10 months ago, although it was, he reflected, possible that she had not aged at all, and that he had been comparing her against the more flexible Petunia of his own first remembering. Vernon was not with her. Dudley was not with her. She had, it appeared, come alone. He watched her briefly through the barrier as he wheeled his trunk through. She caught his eye. She did not smile. She nodded once with the small, unwilling courtesy of a woman who had been told, in writing by a man with a long beard, that her sister's son was to spend the summer with a recently exonerated Black, and that she should not on any account raise objections. He nodded back. He had not, in his memory, ever nodded at her in a way that produced this nod in return. Behind him, Daphne came through the barrier. She had her trunk in one hand and her cat, a small gray one called Helen, Tracy's hand-me-down, in the other. Her parents were 3 columns down, a thin man with a hook nose and a small, severe woman in a hat who had the bearing of a woman whose grandmother had, in her time, written letters of complaint to the king. Daphne did not pause. She went on. Halfway across the platform, however, she slowed. She turned. She looked back. She looked at Harry. Harry was beside her. He had, in the small movement of a man who had walked through a crowd many times, fallen in beside her without either of them having to plan it. They walked together for 10 paces. Wife, husband, Petunia is here. Yours, I take it. Mine, she is unhappy with the arrangement. She is. My parents are also here. They are unhappy with their daughter. They are very unhappy. She has been a difficult child. She has been an extremely difficult child. A pause. The platform around them was full of small chaos, trunks being stowed in cars, cats being identified across distances, a muggle conductor making an announcement that no one was listening to. They came to a stop at the center of the platform where the crowd had a small, still pocket. They turned to face each other. Wiltshire, he said. Surrey, you will write. I will write in green ink, in whatever ink the work requires, in green ink, in green ink. She looked at him. She did the 1/4 of 1 degree nod again, but this time the nod had in it the flicker of a woman who had completed her year and had reasons at the end of it to be content with the shape of her work. He returned the nod with the same flicker. They did not embrace. They did not, anywhere in the public space of the platform, give the watching parents anything to misread. They were friends. They had always been friends. The friendship in this life would do. Husband, wife, in September. In September, she turned, she walked. She rejoined her parents and was instantly and completely a daughter of a minor pureblood family in Wiltshire, 12 years old in a fortnight, with composure for which the family was famous. The mother kissed her on the forehead. The father took the trunk. The three of them disappeared in the way pureblood families disappear, with no fuss at all. Harry walked the long way to Petunia. Aunt, boy, hello. Get in the car. He got in the car. Vernon's car was at the curb, idling, with Vernon at the wheel and Dudley in the back. The drive to Privet Drive took an hour. The aunt in the front passenger seat did not speak to him once. The cousin in the back did not look at him once. The uncle at the wheel made small, cheerful comments about the weather to no one in particular. Harry looked out the window. The countryside went by. The thing about being a god in a child's body in a muggle car, he thought, was that the body did most of the work. The body slumped in the right amount into the seat. The body produced a yawn at the right time. The body did not in any visible way thank the universe that the year was over and that the work for 2 months would be done in someone else's house. He did the work that the body did not do. He kept his face flat, and he kept his eyes neutral, and he did not, in the car, allow himself to be glad. At Privet Drive he was put up in his bedroom. The bedroom was at least a bedroom. The cupboard had 2 years ago, after the Hogwarts letters, been retired. He had inherited Dudley's second bedroom, full of broken toys. He went up. He put down his trunk. He sat on the bed. He looked out the window. It was a small, narrow garden in a small, narrow neighborhood. The light at the back of 7 o'clock was the long English summer light that this far north would not give up for another 2 hours. He sat with his hands in his lap. Far off, over the rooftops, in the direction of London, something he could not at first see was beginning. It was a thunderhead. It had no business being a thunderhead in this weather. The skies had been clear since morning. The forecast, which Vernon had been listening to in the car, had been clear for the next 3 days. The thunderhead built itself in 2 minutes out of nothing. It rose in the southeastern sky like a tower being assembled. It spread. It darkened. It was in its top very high and in its base very near the ground. It did not, however, make any sound. The thunder, when it began, was silent. The thunder was a thunder he could feel only in his chest, in the small interior place where, all year, he had been keeping the king he had been. It was the small, unmistakable salute of a sky that had recognized one of its own and was, very privately, signaling. He did not return it. He did not, in this body, in this house, in this hour, want to draw the attention of any of the watchers he knew were watching. He did, however, allow himself one small private thing. He smiled. He sat on the bed in the small, narrow bedroom in the small, narrow house, and he watched the thunderhead, and he smiled. The smile was 3 breaths long. He did not mark it. He did not put it away. He let it stay on his face for the duration of the smile, and then it left of its own accord. Outside, over London, the silent thunder kept rolling for half an hour, and only one person in the whole of England heard it, and he was 11, and he was 60,000, and he was, this time, going to do it better. That was the picture. He held it for a long beat. He let it pass. He went down to dinner because Petunia had banged on his door once. The dinner was a roast and 3 vegetables and a steamed pudding that Dudley wished out loud was not steamed. Vernon, at the head of the table, gave a small, polite English speech about how it was good to have everyone home, in which Harry's name, for the first time in 11 years of dinners, was inserted. The insertion was, Harry thought, the work of the small envelope Dumbledore had sent. He took it without comment. He ate the roast. He praised the pudding. He went up at 9:30. He read, for an hour, a textbook on second-year Transfiguration that Hermione had lent him as a parting gift. He turned out the lamp at 10:30. The thunderhead, by 10:30, had finished its work and dispersed. The sky over Privet Drive was, when he looked out his window, cloudless again. A few stars had come up in the south. He recognized them. He slept. 3 days later, the first letter arrived. It came not by owl, which would have been remarked on at Privet Drive, but by ordinary muggle post in a thin cream envelope in a hand he knew. He opened it in his bedroom with the door closed. The letter was brief. It said, "Husband, now friend. The Wiltshire visits have begun. My mother had a cousin to dinner on the evening I came home, and the cousin has, by my count, 3 Death Eater acquaintances, 2 of them mid-rank. I have been for 2 days the kind of well-mannered child who pours wine for guests. By the end of the week I will have, I expect, a small but useful list of names. Do not write back to this address. My parents read my outgoing post. Hermione has agreed to be the relay. Send your news to her and I will receive a copy on Tuesdays. He folded the letter. He put it in the loose floorboard under his bed, which had, in the previous life, held nothing more interesting than a school exercise book, and which now held, on its small shelf of secrets, a notepad, 2 letters, a pen, and the small, careful start of a private inventory of useful adults in the area. The summer, by his watch, had begun. By the time he came back to the train at the end of August, he would, in all likelihood, have written a short list of his own, small Surrey adults whose habits he had observed, the postman who could be relied on to lose a letter, the Muggle constable who came round on Tuesdays, the woman 3 doors down who collected odd objects and was, he suspected, a squib who had not yet identified herself. He would have also, by the end of August, made a small private trip with Sirius to a coastal town in Cornwall to test, very gently, whether his other brother had begun to wake. He would have, by the end of August, made a longer trip with Sirius to a Welsh hill where Hades had put a small careful working 20 centuries ago, and where, even now, the working was still in operation, and could, he hoped, be persuaded to give up an old name. He would have done all of that and more, and he would still, at the end of August, be 11. In a flat in Croatia, on the morning of the same day the silent thunder rolled over London, a woman in her late 20s stood in front of a tall mirror in her bathroom and braided her hair, and looked at her face, and did not, this time, look away from it. She had, since New Year, been waking. She had finished in the spring a quiet survey of the Sophia Ministry's records and had compiled for her own use a list of 15 ministry employees whose habits suggested ambitions she did not approve of. She had by this morning decided to take her vacation in England. She had been waking up, she thought, into the version of herself that did not, this time, intend to be married against her will. She had on her bedside table a letter from her stepmother in Wiltshire, which she had not yet opened, but which she had been carrying around the flat for 2 days. She intended to open it in a moment with her tea. She finished her hair. She put down the brush. She picked up the tea. She opened the letter. Persephone in this iteration smiled. Across the channel in a herb farm in Cornwall, a woman of 40 knelt in a row of mint and bee balm and listened to the bees. She had been in this body born to a Muggle family and had had for 4 years a marriage that had ended. She was, at 40, alone on her plot and content with it. She had, since April, been hearing more than she usually heard. The bees, in particular, had begun to make sense as language. She did not, this morning, find the language alarming. She found it familiar. She had, in the back of a half-recalled dream, walked once through a field of bees in a chiton and given them the names she had thought of for them. She did not yet know, in any precise way, what was waking up in her, but she had begun to wear around her wrist a small iron andrope bracelet she had made one evening without thinking and had, in the small private mornings since, begun to suspect was a sign of something the bees would teach her, in time. Demeter, in this iteration, listened to the bees. In a small wooden cottage in Snowdonia, a young woman of 28 in a leather coat and rough trousers was, that afternoon, releasing a fledgling hippogriff back into the air. She had been raising the bird for 10 weeks. She had brought it back from a windbreak that her assistant had thought was unsurvivable. The bird, when she let it go, climbed into the late spring air and made, before it disappeared into the tree line, a single high call that was the sound an arrow makes in flight, and which was older than the arrow. She watched it go. She had not, in any of the previous waking, been quite ready to remember her own name. She had this morning woken from a dream of a moonlit forest and a brother who walked beside her, and she had said on waking the brother's name, and she had not been startled. Artemis, in this iteration, watched her bird climb. In Diagon Alley, in a small shop with a wooden sign painted with an anvil, a man of 54 bent over a workbench and remade a wand. The wand, when he had finished it, was 3% better than the wand it had been. He did not, when he had finished, charge the customer for the improvement. He had in private begun to charge himself with each improvement. He had a small chalkboard in the back of his shop which kept count. The count was 371. He had been, since November, dreaming of a forge in a mountain. He had been, since April, half remembering the smell of a metal that did not, in any catalogue, exist. He did not yet have a name for what was happening in him. He had begun to suspect the name. He was not, this summer, in a hurry to confirm it. Hephaestus, in this iteration, kept count. In a pub in Edinburgh, a man behind the counter laughed too loudly at a customer's joke, and the laugh did not quite belong to the man, and the customer, who had been having a bad day, suddenly had a less bad day and did not know why. Dionysus, in this iteration, was working a Friday evening shift. In a ministry corridor in London, a tall, quick man with a tawny mane of hair stopped on his way back from a hearing and stood, for a moment, with his hand on the wall, because the wall was, briefly, ringing. He could not, in any way he could later have described, identify the sound. He was a man who had been, for 40 years, cordially feared by his subordinates and cordially respected by his superiors, and he was that morning beginning to feel that something which had been at the back of his neck for as long as he could remember was, at last, beginning to step forward. He did not this morning address it. He had a hearing in 20 minutes. He stood up off the wall, straightened his shoulders, and went on. Ares, in this iteration, was running late. In a small flat in a small town on the south coast of France, a woman in her early 30s woke, that afternoon, from a long nap into the long summer light. She had been for half a year increasingly disinterested in the man she had been living with. She had that morning packed a single bag, and the bag was, when she woke, by the door. She did not in any precise way know yet where she would go. She knew it was time to go. She had been since February, dreaming of a great green sea and an island full of doves. She put on the linen dress she had been keeping for travel. She picked up the bag. She left. Aphrodite, in this iteration, did not look back. In a sea cave on the coast of Scotland, into which the tide came at evening and out of which it did not, before morning, retreat, an old man with white hair sat on a rock at the back of the cave and watched the surf come in. He had not, in this body, ever lived anywhere but on the coast. He had, in this body, never been further inland than 30 miles. He had been in this body for 68 years, an ordinary fisherman, and he had thought all his life that the sound of the sea was the sound of the sea, and that this was sufficient. In the last fortnight, the sound of the sea had begun, in his hearing, to acquire a syntax. He did not yet know what the syntax was. He did that evening sit longer than he usually sat. He had begun to listen. Poseidon, in this iteration, was beginning at last to listen. Back at Privet Drive, in the small narrow bedroom in the small narrow house, Harry, who had no way to see any of these waking faces, did not need to see them. He had felt the silent thunder. He knew, in the small accurate part of himself that always knew, that an inventory was beginning. He set up his desk under the window. He took out a sheet of parchment. He began very carefully to write a letter to Hermione, with the small careful word spacings of a man who had a great deal of work in front of him, and intended, this time, to do it without forgetting any of his colleagues' names. He wrote until the light failed. He did not turn on the lamp. The dark, when it came in through the window, was not unfriendly. It was not, this time, the dark of a cupboard. It was, this time, the long English summer dusk of an island that, while he had been sleeping, had become a great deal more interesting than he had given it credit for. He listened to the dark. The dark listened back. After a while he stood. He folded the letter. He went to bed. Chapter 7 End.